Hey, I'm Alan Brito, I'm an architect, and welcome to this introduction to Blender for architects. In the next 3.5 hours, I'll teach you how to get started with Blender, with a special focus on architectural design. I do know that a lot of 3D artists, they use Blender to create architectural visualization, but very few architects consider Blender as part of their 3D modeling workflow. My objective here is to try to change that. I'm an architect and I have been using Blender for the past 20 years, more than 20 years. I started with Blender back in 2005 with Blender 2.35, so it's more than 20 years. I wrote many books about Blender, created many different workshops, and gave live trainings about Blender, so I want to pass this experience here to anyone trying to use Blender to do architectural 3D modeling. And I will go to every step that a beginner or someone that is starting with Blender needs to know. For instance, I will go to the user interface. I will explain about editors, how to manage the user interface, how to do 3D navigation, how to manage precise 3D modeling. Units, you will learn how to manage units with the metric system and the imperial system. We will go to managing materials, importing external assets, for instance, how to import SketchUp files to Blender and do some basic rendering. This is an introduction, and my goal here is to make you feel comfortable, make you feel that you can take Blender and insert this incredible resource into your 3D modeling workflow, into your architectural modeling workflow. And once you finish this introduction, I hope you feel more comfortable about exploring what else Blender can do for architectural design. For instance, do you know that you can use Blender to do beam modeling with Bonsai, the old Blender beam? You can use Blender to do 2D drafting. I know it sounds crazy, but you can use Blender to do 2D drafting. You can even use Blender for instance, our environmental analysis. The problem with all of these additional resources is that you need to know the basics, and this is what I want to teach you in this introduction. And I can't forget, you can, of course, use Blender to do 3D animation for architecture. It's a really powerful tool to make presentations about your designs. So let's get ready to start this introduction to Blender for architects. And since the runtime for this course is close to 3.5 hours, I will leave links in the description with timestamps in case you want to jump to any specific part of this course. And by the way, in the description, I will also leave links for some of my workshops in case you want to go beyond the basics to what I'll be teaching you in this introduction. Not only workshops, but some of my books. I will leave links here in case you want to get any of them. And remember, if you are a member of the channel, a pro member of the channel, you can get those workshops and books for free. So if you want to support my work, consider becoming a member of the channel. So I think we are ready. Let's get started with this introduction to Blender for architects. So let's begin lesson 1. You already know, you took an overview of the course, you know the sequence, and we can start from the very first step that you need to do in order to get started with Blender for architecture. And I'm assuming you are a complete beginner. You don't even have ever downloaded Blender before. So the first thing that you need to do is, of course, downloading Blender. And the best place to do this is on the Blender Foundation website. This is the site here, blender.org. And to get Blender, this is the best place. You will find all of the official releases from Blender here on the Blender Foundation website, blender.org. I will leave a link in the description in case you just want to click and go there to download Blender. You might be asking yourself, is there a secret to download Blender? Do I need to know anything about Blender or a trick to get Blender? Not really. It's quite straightforward. to download Blender. But I want to give you an overview and a tour of the Blender Foundation website and the places where you can get not only Blender, but different versions of Blender. So when you first open the website, you will see that Blender will display here, or the Blender Foundation website will display you two locations where you can get Blender. First, you will see here a banner with the latest version of Blender. Right now, it's version 5.1. Fun fact, not sure if you are aware, but Blender receives an update every 4 months. Yeah, it's crazy. Every 4 months, Blender receives a new version. So Blender 5.1 came out by the end of March. Around June or July, we will be getting Blender 5.2. And another place, you will see that you have a download button here to get Blender, and you can also get Blender from here. In the top menu, you will see a download section. They will both take you here to this screen. In this screen, you will see that the website will identify what is your operating system, and it will offer you an option to download. It's offering me here to download the Blender installer, and I'll be using Blender 5.1.1, which is the latest version. Now, if you just want to get Blender, you don't really want to do anything else, just click on this button, it will start the download. But if you want to explore more options from the website, you can expand this button here and you will see a lot more options. For instance, you have an option here to get the installer. This is the same installer that it was offering me before. And we have another alternative here to download Blender, which is a Windows Portable. What is a portable software? This is a version of Blender that do not require an installation process. For instance, let's say you are a student and you are using your one computer from your school, university, where your user do not have permission to install software. If you use a portable version, you just need to extract the content and it will run Blender with no need to install anything, which is great. You can also run Blender from a flash drive, from a portable hard drive. It will work with no need to do any kind of installation. Another option is to get it from the Microsoft Store. You have options here to get Blender with an ARM version, both an installer and a portable version. For Mac Silicon, for Apple Silicon, for macOS, you have an option to download, of course, for Linux. You can get Blender from Steam, and in case you want to dig into the Blender source code, you can download it from here. It's quite small, 86 megabytes for the source code. One quick note here, in case you decided to get Blender from either the Microsoft Store or Steam, you will probably get an older version of Blender. They will eventually catch up with the version offered by the Blender Foundation website, but in many cases, they will be a few weeks behind on releases here from the Blender Foundation website. Besides getting Blender from here, if you scroll down in this page, you will see that we have an option here called Blender Experimental. If you click there, you will see that we already have an option to download the next release from Blender, which is Blender 5.2 in alpha. So if you want to get Blender in alpha, Blender 5.2, you can already get it from here. But if you are a beginner, if you are still learning how to get started with Blender, I do not recommend you to use an alpha version. Even if you are an experienced user, unless you know what you are doing, an alpha version, it usually has features that they are not still finished, they are unstable, and unless you are willing to test them and report bugs, stay away from an alpha version. By the way, when we are close to the release of Blender 5.2, the beta will appear on this page in case you want to try that before everyone else, before the stable release is available for the general public. If we go back, I also want to explore here the Blender LTS. You have this icon here, this link pointing to the LTS versions. What is that? If you open this page, you will see that it will display versions of Blender with long-term support. That's what LTS stands for. These are versions of Blender that you can adopt and start using, for instance, on your company, on your business, and the Blender Foundation will keep them up to date with security patches and bug fixes for a longer period. For instance, if you are not willing to update to the latest versions, to the most up-to-date version of Blender every 4 months, you can start using just an LTS version and you will be good to go. For instance, Blender 4.5, it will be supported, the LTS version will be supported until July of next year, as you can see here. Another interesting, let me go back. You will see that we have another link here called previous versions. This one here is really, really useful, so pay close attention. What can you get with these previous versions? You have an option to get a list with every single Blender version released all the way to Blender 1.0. If you click here on this download any Blender version, it will open this page here with lots of folders, and if you start to scroll down, you will see that you will have Blender versions up to Blender 1.0. If you open this page here, you will see that you will get the install files for Blender 1.0. And if I'm not mistaken, the latest or the oldest version of Blender that you can run on Windows 10, Windows 11, or a modern version of an operating system, that if you want to try that, it's Blender 1.8. You can get it from here, and it will run on Windows 10, Windows 11. In case you want to try that, just be prepared to take a big scare on the user interface because it was really, really different. Fun fact, this here was the first version. This here was the version that I started to use Blender back in 2005, Blender 2.35. So why is this important? Why do you want to keep this as an option when you start using Blender? Because Blender is not immune to bugs or things breaking down. For instance, there is a feature right now in Blender 5.1 to create line art to render, for instance, vector files that do not work with Blender 5.1. The feature is there, the tools are there, but it doesn't work. If you want to use this feature, you have to roll back to Blender 5.0. That's why you need an easy way to get older versions of Blender, and this is one of the best options. For instance, if you just need Blender 5.0, just click on the link here. It will open a list of files that you can download from this location to get the Blender version that you need for your project. So if you don't really need anything else from here, you can just go straight to the download section, click here, download Blender, and start downloading the software. Install, follow the prompts. And by the way, just one quick mention here, because a lot of people get confused about this. Blender is 100% free and open source. You don't have to pay anything to get started with Blender, to start using Blender. Unlike other tools that we use in architecture, for instance, if you have an office, if you have a location with 20 computers, 80 computers, 200 computers, you can install Blender on all of them and you won't be paying anything. But the Blender Foundation needs funding, so you might see a prompt here or there asking for a donation like this one here, which is perfectly fine. Remember, this is a donation. If you want to help, you can donate to the Blender Foundation. If you don't, if you can't, or if you are not willing to donate, it's perfectly fine. Just download Blender and start using it for your projects. Now that you know how to download Blender and many of the options that we have here on the Blender Foundation website, we can begin on our next section, which is what you have to do when you open Blender for the first time. So let's begin section 2 of lesson 1, which is what you have to do once you open Blender for the first time. This is what you find when you fire up Blender for the first time. This is the quick setup screen, which will offer you a few options and settings to get started with Blender. Let's take a look on how they work. First, you can change the user interface language from Blender. I'll be using, of course, English, but if you click here, you will expand and you can use Blender in any language that you want. Just keep in mind that not all options here for languages will have a 100% translated user interface. For instance, if you scroll into any of them, you'll see that Blender will display, for instance, a Bulgarian here has only 1% of the user interface translated. Another option is to choose the theme. The default theme for Blender is Blender Dark. I'll be using a modified version of Blender Dark for this course, which I call Blender Dark KDP. This is the same theme that I use to produce the screenshots for my books. What is the difference between Blender Dark and Blender KDP? I just made some small tweaks. For instance, I increased the size of the vertices, I increased the size of edges, the thickness of edges, and just some small tweaks into colors. But other than that, it's the same theme. When I open here the preferences panel, I will show you exactly what I did to make those changes. Another option, in case you don't like the dark theme, you can use Blender Light, but most of the users, almost everyone, prefer to use Blender Dark. So this is the theme that I'll be using. Another option is the key map. You can choose other key maps. For instance, if you are migrating from SketchUp, from 3ds Max, from Maya, you can choose this option here, industry compatible, which will try to get the hotkeys, the shortcuts from Blender in a similar way to what you find in other 3D tools. If you are migrating from an older version of Blender, you can choose Blender 2.7x. I'll be using the default key map for Blender. You can choose here what is the mouse button that you want to use for selection. Fun fact, before Blender 2.8, we used to use the right mouse button to select objects in Blender. Now we use the left mouse button as every other 3D software. We have another option here, which is to define the behavior of the space bar. Since I won't be making any animations in this introductory course, I will change here the spacebar action from play to search. Or in case you want, you can also use tools. Why do you want to change the spacebar behavior? Because you'll be losing the spacebar in case you are not using or making any kind of animation. You'll be letting a massive key on your keyboard with zero function in Blender. So after choosing here these options, by the way, if you miss these options here, you can change everything from here on the Blender user preferences panel. So to close this, click anywhere with the left mouse button on an empty location and you will be good to go. One of the first things that I usually recommend people to do is to take a look into the user interface and see if the resolution fits their needs. For instance, I'm using a 4K monitor here and everything is really, really small. And the Blender user interface, most of it is based on vector files. So you can zoom in, zoom out, resize everything, and it will adapt to your screen. How can you do that? Do you have to change the resolution of your system? No, it's quite easy. You have to open here the edit preferences. And once you do that, you will see this panel, which is the preferences. And on the first tab, you see here the interface and you have this control here, resolution scale. With the resolution scale, you can change the resolution scale, for instance, to something like 1.3, and you will increase the resolution of your user interface by 30%. If you type here something like 1.5, it will go even higher. But for us, I think 1.3 works great, so I will leave that with 1.3. And by the way, if you want to make changes to your theme the same way as I did, you have the Themes here tab, and you can come here and expand the options. Let me just open here the 3D viewport section, and if you scroll down, you will see here these were the options that I modified for this theme. It's basically this list here. Let me take the screen here again. These were the options that I changed: the wedge, the edge width, the vertex size, and the outline, the object origin size. Just 3 quick settings. So in case you want to use the same theme as me, just change these settings here. Again, in case you miss it, open your theme selector using the theme tab, expand the 3D viewport, scroll down all the way to this sequence here and change the numbers. So in case you want to match the same theme as me. Now, one fundamental thing, or one aspect of the Blender user interface that you really need to understand, is that Blender works based on editors. This is the user interface. You will see that many places here on the user interface, you will find a small division, sometimes a large division like this one that we have here at the center. But in each one of these divisions here, you will find an editor. And what is an editor? We have 4 editors here. An editor, you can think of an editor as a mini application inside Blender, which has a dedicated job, or is specialized into doing something. For instance, you have the 3D viewport, this one here, which is of course specialized in display 3D data. You have the outliner, which works in a way. For instance, if you are coming from SketchUp, it works as the tag manager from SketchUp. If you are coming from AutoCAD, it's the layer manager. You have here the properties editor. This is where you will be making changes to selected objects properties, like numeric data. You can apply materials. You can manage these options from objects. You have here at the bottom, you have the timeline, which, as the name implies, this is an editor specialized into creating and managing animation. So you can resize these divisions here. You just need to place your mouse cursor on an edge, a border between 2 editors, and you will see that the cursor will turn into a 2-arrow. It will gain 2 arrows, and you can left click and resize the editors. Let me zoom out so you can take a better look. You can resize in any way this editor. And one good thing about these divisions is that you can replace your editors. For instance, let's say I want another 3D viewport here. You will notice that usually on the top left of each editor, you will find a selector. We have one here, we have one here, one here, and one here. You can see top left of each one of the editors. And if you click there, it will expand and display all of the options that you have available here in Blender to choose different editors. For instance, you have the geometry node editors, you have the shader editor to control materials, you have here your asset browser. The asset browser will give you access to something like a library of objects that you can create in Blender to reuse, for instance, furniture models or models from other projects. And let's say I need another 3D viewport. I can just select here another 3D viewport, and Blender will display another editor for me here. Now, what if we need more divisions? Is there a way to create more divisions? Yes. If you right click on the border between two existing divisions, you will see that it will display here the area options. And I can choose, for instance, here to go with a vertical split, horizontal split, or you can join up or down an existing division, or you can swap areas. For instance, if we choose here to go with a vertical split, it will give us the option to divide our screen like this, or go with an horizontal split. And you can keep splitting, creating divisions here on the user interface and choose different editors. You can go crazy here. Choose many different types of editors. Let's go with the Python console. And you can divide your user interface in any way that you want. Now, how can we get back into that layout from Blender? How can we remove those divisions? Right click again and choose join right or join left. You will see that an arrow will point to the direction where an existing division will expand. For instance, this one here will join right, so it will expand it to the right. We can do the same here. Right click, join up. It will expand the Python console. And you can do the same here. Right click, join right, right click, join down, and it will keep expanding things, and we are back to that initial layout minus the timeline editor that I just removed from below here, from the bottom of our screen. Another way to manage divisions in the user interface, if you place your cursor on the corners of a screen, you'll see that it will turn into a cross. And when you get into that location and you click and drag your mouse cursor on an horizontal direction, it will create a vertical split. It's the opposite of the direction where you move the mouse. For instance, if I place my cursor here and move it vertically, it will create an horizontal division. You can do the same thing to join areas. So I can click here and drag my mouse up. You will see an arrow pointing to the join areas direction, and it will manage, you will be able to manage your the divisions on your user interface like that. When you are satisfied and you think, now this is a layout that I can work with, you can save any of the changes that you made into the Blender user interface by coming here under the File, Defaults, and saving this file here with Save Startup File. When you save this file, this is a small Blender file that will be created on your computer preferences, on your settings, and Blender will read this file whenever it opens for the next time, or it creates a new project. So anything that you save right now will be used to create a new file, even 3D models. So if you want to create a template or something that you always will be looking, or something that will be always used on a future project, you can save this file here with Save Startup File. And in case you regret your choices and you want to reset everything to the way Blender opened for the first time, just choose here Load Factory Settings, and Blender will erase this file and load the default settings and get it back to the way it was when you open it for the first time. Now that you already know how to use editors in Blender and how to manage the user interface, we can move forward and begin section 3 from lesson 1, where I will explain how to use add-ons and we'll talk about shortcuts in Blender. Let's begin with add-ons. First, what are add-ons? Add-ons, they are extensions. You can think of them as if they were plugins for Blender that will include or make Blender do things that will go beyond what it offers with the default tools. You will find that many professional Blender artists or experienced Blender artists, they will use a lot of add-ons because, well, they are really powerful. Now, how can you install add-ons? If you want to install free and open source add-ons from the Blender official extensions repository, which you can think as if it was something like an app store for add-ons in Blender, you have to go to the Edit, Preferences, and open here the Get Extensions tab. When you open this tab, you will find here this message. If you are opening it for the first time, Blender will ask you to access the internet because it needs to download the add-on files to install on your system. So I will provide Blender internet access here. It will only ask you this once. And now we can search for add-ons. If you know the name of the add-on, you can just type it here and it will display the name of the add-on right here. I already have this Screencast Keys add-on installed, so it's not displaying for me an option to install it. But for instance, you will see that if you want to install any add-on, just click on the install button. If you want to remove an add-on or uninstall it, just click on this arrow, choose install, uninstall, and for instance, in case you buy an add-on, yes, there are paid add-ons in Blender, and some add-ons, they are not part of the Blender extensions repository, so you have to download them from places like GitHub, and you will get a zip file that you need to install in Blender. In that case, you can come here under Get Extensions and use this arrow here and choose Install from Disk, and you will point to the zip file. You also have here another tab called Add-ons. In this tab, you can manage add-ons, and by managing, I mean you can enable or disable an add-on and keep it installed. So for instance, I have here the Screencast Keys, but it's currently disabled. I can just click here and I just enabled the add-on. Usually when you enable an add-on, it will make a change to the user interface. For instance, in the case of the Screencast Keys, if you take a look here on my interface, I can expand the sidebar here, the 3D viewport sidebar, and you will see a new tab called Screencast Keys. This is from the add-on. I will enable the add-on here. Let me just change here the font size to 64, and now what does this add-on did here to my user interface? It will include, if you look here on the lower left corner, you now see whenever I press a key or type a keystroke on my user interface, it will display. Let me clear that. It will display the key, even the mouse. It will display what keys I'm pressing. Now, if you want to keep track of everything that I'm doing here in Blender, just take a look on the lower left side of my screen and you will be able to see, for instance, if I'm pressing one particular key or what is the mouse button that I'm using to navigate in 3D. Now, another important thing that you need to keep in mind here is something called the active editor. I just explained what are editors in Blender. You know that you can select an editor using these buttons here on the header of your editor or of your current editor, and you can select any other editor that you want. Now, regarding shortcuts, Blender uses a lot of shortcuts. You will see me using a lot of keys, shortcuts, key combinations to do a lot of stuff here related to editing, 3D modeling, 3D navigation. And one thing that you need to understand is the concept of the active editor. What is the active editor? The active editor is it's the editor where your mouse cursor is currently above. For instance, right now, the active editor is the 3D viewport. If I move my mouse here, the active editor is the timeline. If I move my mouse cursor here, the active editor is the property editor. Why is that important? Because depending on the active editor, one shortcut might or might not work. For instance, if I press the N key now, I will open and close my 3D viewport sidebar. Just pressing the N key. Easy, right? But if my mouse cursor is here on the properties editor, if I press N, nothing will happen. You can see that Blender is taking the N key. You can keep track of the keys here on my lower left side of my screen. If I press the N key, let me select Blender again. If I press the N key, absolutely nothing is happening. If I do the same with my mouse cursor on the outliner, nothing's happening. If I try to do the same on the timeliner with my cursor, with my mouse cursor on above the timeline, nothing will happen. But if I try the same with the cursor, with my mouse cursor on the 3D viewport, it will open and close the sidebar. So the point here is that depending on where your mouse cursor is, pressing a key might or might not work to call a function, to do something in Blender. So if you press a key and nothing happens, first thing you have to look at is where is your mouse cursor? What is which one is the active editor in your Blender? So this is important because in the next lesson, the first thing that we'll start to do is a 3D navigation, and it uses a lot of shortcuts. Let's begin lesson 2, where we will start learning how to do 3D navigation in Blender. If you are coming from something like SketchUp, AutoCAD, 3ds Max, you will see that a lot of the concepts and resources that you use there to do 3D navigation will also work here in Blender with a few key differences. Now, as any 3D software, I strongly advise you to be productive, to use a combination of keyboard and mouse. Blender will give you tools to use something like a trackpad to do 3D navigation, but it will require a few additional clicks to do some tasks. So if you want to be productive, I strongly advise you to use a mouse. Now, most of the 3D navigation, or all of the 3D navigation that we'll be doing, will be on the 3D viewport. So I will expand my 3D viewport here and remove the timeline, so we won't be needing the timeline for a lot of, or for anything that we'll be doing in this course. So what is the first key that I want to teach you is the middle mouse button. This is one of the most important keys because it will give you a way to orbit your scene. When you press the middle mouse button or the mouse wheel, just press it and you will move your mouse, your cursor, and you will orbit the scene. If you use the shift key with the middle mouse button, you will move your screen like a pen move. If you use the control key, press and hold control and use the middle mouse button and drag your cursor up and down, you will zoom in and zoom out. If you use the scroll wheel on your mouse, you will be able to zoom in and zoom out as well. Now, for architecture, we will be using a lot of orthographic views. And how can we use orthographic views in Blender? There are two ways. First one is with a menu option, and the second is with a shortcut. Let me show you the menu first, so you can come here under View and go to Viewpoint, and you will see the shortcuts here, the list of options. You can see here top, bottom, front, back, right, and left. And the shortcuts, they will use the numeric keyboard or your numeric keypad. So let me show you how they work. In case you are not aware, some people do not know what is a numeric keyboard. It's this part of the keyboard here. If you are using a full-size keyboard, you will see that on the right, you will get numeric keys. And for instance, if I press the number 7, it will go to the top view. Let me just bring Blender here to be active on my system. And if you press again number 7, it will go to top view. How do I know that it's the top view? If you take a look here on the top left side of your screen, you'll see that Blender will display the name of your view right here. Now, if I press, for instance, number 1, it will go to front view. Number 3, right view. If I choose, for instance, number 7 again, and if you press Ctrl 7, it will go to the opposite view. For instance, 7 will go to top. If I press Ctrl 7, it will go to the bottom. Number 1, it's front. Ctrl 1 is back. Number 3 is right. Ctrl 3 is left. If you press the number 5, it will change the projection of your screen from perspective to orthographic. You will find a similar, there is a similar option, for instance, in SketchUp that you can do exactly like this, changing from orthographic to perspective. Now, what if you are using a computer or a device with a compact keyboard, or something like a laptop, a small laptop that doesn't have a numeric keyboard? Can you still use the keys to do 3D navigation? Yes, but you need to enable an option here in the Blender user preferences. If you go to the Edit, Preferences, and here under Input, you will see that here, Input tab, you will find this option here called Emulate Numpad. When you enable this option, Blender will start using the alphanumeric keys, the numeric keys above your letters, as if they were the numeric keyboard. So you can use them to do 3D navigation. So this is useful for people using compact keyboards or a device with no numeric keyboard, like small laptops. And besides these options, you will also find here on this side of the screen a few options to do 3D navigation. For instance, you have this gizmo here, which looks like something that you find in softwares like AutoCAD, Revit, that you can use with the mouse cursor to do 3D navigation. You can orbit, you can set orthographic keys. This is useful if you don't have a mouse enabled. And you have these keys here, which will also give ways or options to do 3D navigation. Let me show you how they work. First, you can use this gizmo here. Just click inside the circle area and drag your cursor, and it will do 3D orbit. This will work, for instance, if you don't have a mouse button. If you don't have a middle mouse button, you can use, for instance, these ladders here with axes. For instance, if I press on the Z, it will go to the top. The X will go to the right. And if I choose -X, it will go to the left. You can use this icon here to zoom in and out. You can use this hand icon to move your screen. This will change to the active camera, this camera icon, and this grid here will change from perspective to orthographic. And we do have a camera here, but let's not talk about cameras right now. Let's focus on learning how to do 3D navigation, and selecting objects will be our next topic. So right now, the important thing is to learn or to memorize these shortcuts to do 3D navigation, because you will be using them a lot here in Blender. So middle mouse button, Shift middle mouse button to move your screen, Control middle mouse button, and your numeric keys to set orthographic views. So let's move to selecting objects in Blender. And what is the next step? Now that you know how to do 3D navigation in Blender, the next natural step is to learn how to control units here in Blender, because if you are willing to use Blender for architecture, units are a critical factor. So where can we make changes and see what are the units that Blender is using? First, when you take a look into the properties editor or anywhere in the Blender user interface, you will see that Blender will always start using meters. So if you take a look here, for instance, on locations, you will see that it's using meters. We can see there that it's showing 0 meters for X, Y, and Z. This is important because this is the default setting of Blender. So if you are looking to use Blender with imperial units, you have to make changes to the Blender settings to adjust the units to your project settings. Now, where can we control the units? If you open here the scene panel or the scene tab in the properties panel, let me expand this so you can take a better look. If you open here the scene tab, you will see that we have an option called units. And here on units, you will see that we can control the unit system, the length. For instance, if you want to change between the metric and imperial system, just change here from metric to imperial. And you can change the length from, for instance, feet to inches. Let me go back here to metric. You can change between meters, centimeters, millimeters. Let's choose centimeters. Let me remove those annotations, and for instance, I just selected centimeters as my units. If I open my sidebar here, the 3D viewport sidebar, by pressing the N key and going to the item here, you will see that one of the fields here will display the dimensions of selected objects. And let me zoom in. You'll see that Blender is currently displaying centimeters. When I change here from centimeters to meters, it will change to meters. If I change to millimeters, it will display millimeters. The same applies if I try, for instance, to change here to the imperial system and choose feet. It will display the lengths in feet. Now, many people using imperial units for architectural design will look or want to display lengths or distances using 2 units. Instead of using a fraction, you'll be displaying lengths, for instance, using 1 feet and 6 inches. Can Blender do that? Yes, you can use this type of notation in Blender by coming here and choosing imperial, and you have to enable this option here called separate units. Once you do this, let me enable this so you can take a look, you will see that Blender will display lengths using feet and inches. This is not restricted to imperial units. If you select here, for instance, the metric system and go, for instance, with 2.5, it will display 2 meters and 50 centimeters. So the secret, in case you are trying to use Blender with the imperial system, is to enable here the separate units to display lengths and distances using feet and inches. Now, one important setting here that you will see, of course, I just explained to you that this panel here, the item tab, will display the dimension of any selected object, and you can type here the size of the object. Let me place the cube here and I will zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. Now, for instance, if I select this cube and I type here the length, let's say, let me disable here the separate units. Let's say I will type here 3 since I'm using meters, Blender will fill here the option or the distance with 3 meters. But Blender is clever. Even if you use a different suffix for your distance, Blender will make the conversion. For instance, if I type here 250 cm for centimeters, Blender will make the conversion and it will turn that into meters. If I type here 6,000 millimeters, it will convert that to meters. The same applies for imperial units. For instance, if I type here just 9 ft for feet, it will understand that I want to use 9 feet. If I go with 24 inches, it will convert that to 2 feet. So you can type here the distance and Blender will make the conversion and make the adjustments for you to display the unit with what you are actually using based on what you have on a scene from the scene tab. So in summary, if you are trying to use, or if you want to use Blender with the metric system and using meters, you don't really have to do anything. Blender will start that way. If you want anything else, you have to make this change here with, for instance, imperial units, separate units, and going here, choosing between feet or inches. And by the way, remember, if you make these changes here on the units panel, unless you come here under the file, defaults, save startup file, you have to make this change or change your units every single time you open Blender. So make this adjustment, pick your units, and save the startup file so you don't have to do this every time you start a new project in Blender. Now that you know how to control units in Blender, the next step is to learn how to measure distances. And of course, if you are trying to use Blender to do architectural modeling, architectural visualization, measuring distances is a critical skill that you need to learn to take better control or to control your workflow here in Blender. And what is the best way to measure distances in Blender? There are many different alternatives. One of them, one of the easiest options is by using the measure tool, which is this option right here from the tool shelf. And by the way, if you want, you can place your cursor here, click and drag, and review the names of these tools here from the tool shelf. Now I will enable the measure tool, and once you do this, you can click and drag anywhere on your screen and Blender will start creating rulers. And as you can see here, I just created 3 of them. Now, managing these rulers here in Blender, it's quite different from what you probably are used to do with softwares like SketchUp, AutoCAD. For instance, these are not 3D objects. They might appear as 3D objects, but they do not behave as 3D objects. For instance, one of the things that you will notice is that once you disable or select any other tool here in Blender, the rulers will disappear. They will only be visible if you have the measure tool enabled. Now, to select, move, and control these rulers, the secret here is to interact with either the start or end of each one of the rulers. For instance, if I place my cursor here, you will see that, let me zoom in so you can take a better look. If I zoom in, you will see that when I place my cursor at the beginning or end of a ruler, the cursor will change to 4 arrows. Now, if I click there, this is the way to select your rulers. I will select this one. You will see that it will become highlighted. And if I place my cursor here at the middle of each one, any of these rulers, you will see that it will turn into a cross. And if I click and drag, I will break the ruler and it will turn into an angle measure instead of a distance. So a lot of people try to select the rulers. The first time they try to use this tool by clicking at the middle here, and they will end up breaking the ruler, turning the ruler into an angle measurement tool. Now, when you have it selected, you can, for instance, delete the tools or delete the rulers. Let me select them. I will select the ruler here. Now, I just created here random rulers on my 3D viewport. Now, how can I measure distances from these objects here using the rulers? If you press and hold the Control key while using the rulers, you will enable the snapping options from Blender. Especially if you don't have it enabled yet, I will explain about the snapping tools from Blender in a later lesson. But right now, if you want to start using the snapping tools, just press and hold the Control key while creating a ruler. For instance, if I press and hold Control and try to create a ruler here, you will see that Blender will start capturing snapping points. I will see here a small square for a vertex, a triangle for the mid location of an edge, the center point of an edge, a circle for the center point of a face. For instance, let's say I want to measure the height of this cube. Press and hold Control, click and drag to create a ruler, and it will measure the height of this cube. If I want to measure this from this point here, this distance, the distance from this point to this point, I can press and hold Control. Blender will capture the point, the snapping, and I will draft here my ruler. You can capture, for instance, I will start from the mid location, the center point of this edge, to the center point of this edge here. It will create the ruler. The downside, of course, if you select anything else here, the rulers will disappear. But it's a valid way to measure distances. Let's say I want to know what is the distance between this point here and this point. I will press and hold Control and draft a ruler between these 2 points. And Blender will create the ruler showing this distance. What if I have an angle that I need to measure? You can create the ruler. Let's say I will create the ruler here. And I want to measure this angle. Click in the middle, press and hold Control until it snaps there at the corner, and you will have the 90-degree angle measuring this this angle here from this object. So this is just a quick overview on how to use the measure tool. There are other ways to measure distances in Blender, but using the measure tool is the easiest because, well, it's there on the tool shelf on the left. It's always there available for you to make quick quick measurements in Blender. Let's begin lesson 3. Until this point, you learned how to control the user interface, manage editors. You learned about units in Blender, the active editor, how to measure distances, and the next step is to learn how to select objects. What is the easiest way to select objects in Blender? A simple left click. If you click in any of the objects here, you will add them to your selection. How do you know that one object is selected here in Blender? There are many different clues here that will give you hints that one object is selected. First one, of course, is this colored outliner around the object, around the selected object. The color of this outline will depend on the theme that you are using for Blender. And another clue, more clues, for instance, on the top left, you will see the name of the object here on the top left. And you will also see the object name highlighted in the outliner, the editor, the outliner. Now, What if you want to select everything quickly in Blender? Well, there is a shortcut for that. Press the A key and you will be able to select everything. And if you press Alt A, it will remove everything from the selection. We do have a select menu here on the top left with all of the options related to selecting objects in Blender. You have here the A key to select everything. You have the none, Alt A. You can invert a selection with Control I. Now, one thing that you will probably try here in Blender is to create or draw a box select. That is how we select a lot of things, a lot of entities in CAD tools. For instance, if I draw a box here, Blender will select everything that it's inside that box. And unlike many CAD tools, we don't have two modes for box selecting here in Blender. For instance, if you draw a box from left to right or right to left, it will work the same way. And Blender always uses a crossed window selection. What is a crossed window selection? This is the behavior when you have, for instance, a box selection, and just the fact that touching an object, the object doesn't need to be completely inside the selection window, it will add the object to the selection. Now, what if you want to gain more control over your selections? How to, for instance, select each one of them using a simple click instead of drafting or drawing a box selection? Then you have to use the Shift key. If you press and hold the Shift key, you can keep clicking on objects and Blender will add them to the selection. You can also press and hold the Shift key and Control. For instance, I can add or remove objects from a selection. But before we go forward and try to do this, let me explain another thing related to how Blender works with multiple objects, which is the concept of the active object in a selection. What is an active object in a selection? If you take a closer look here on these 4 objects, you will see that I clicked on the camera object as the last one, and you will see that the color here that it's using, the orange tone here, it's a little lighter. It's brighter than what we have in the other objects. This is a visual clue telling me that this is the active object in the selection. The active object in a selection Blender works, for instance, when you are trying to create a tool or make those objects interact between them. The active one will be the object, for instance, that will remain, or it will keep the origin point and other features. For instance, when you try to join multiple 3D objects, the active object, it's the one that will keep the name, keep materials and other properties. You need to know how to manage active objects because it will impact how you add or remove objects from a selection. Let me show you one example. It will be clear what it means. For instance, let's try to select this camera here. Press and hold Shift. Select this light. Select this sofa. Select this sofa here as the last one. And as you can notice, this sofa, the outline here, it's brighter, and this is the active object because this was the last one selected. It means that, for instance, let's say I want to remove this sofa here from the selection. Since it's not the active object in a selection, if I press and hold Shift and try to click there once, Blender will turn this object into the active one in the selection. If I press and hold Shift again and click one more time, it will remove the object from the selection. So from there, you can always consider that if the object is not the active one, you have to click on the same on that entity twice to remove it from a selection. I know it sounds confusing, but with time you will get used to that. For instance, let's say I want to remove this sofa here. As you can notice, this is the active object. This is not the active one. So press and hold shift, click once, twice, and it will remove the object from the selection. If I have here 3 objects, neither of them is the active one. If I press and hold shift, click at the camera, Blender will turn this one into the active object. And if I try to remove it, just a single click will remove the active object from a selection. So you have to get used to using this active object concept, because depending on if you have your object as the active as the active object in a selection, you have to click there once or twice to either add or remove it from a selection. And just to finish this part about selection, another way to select objects is, of course, by name. And if you have a large scene with dozens, hundreds of objects, I strongly advise you to assign unique names to them. And here in the outliner, you can type the name of the object. Let me type here sofa, and Blender will highlight and point you to the names of the objects with sofa. And since I have 2 of them, it will highlight just the 2 objects. You can see that we can't see anymore the camera and light. If I remove this filter, it will go back and display the names of all objects in my scene. So how can you rename objects in Blender? Just select the object that you want to assign a unique name, and you can either double click here in the outliner. Let's call this sofa 3 seats. And I will try to rename this object here as well, this other sofa. Another way to rename it is just selecting the object and pressing F2 on your keyboard, and you can assign any name that you want, press enter, and it will rename your object. So this is how you can assign unique names to your objects in Blender. And since we know now how to select objects in Blender, we can start moving and making transformations here on the 3D viewport. For instance, I have this sofa selected, and how can I make a transformation? How can I move it? How can I rotate or scale this object? There are many different ways, as always in Blender, and you can use either something like a widget that will help you to move it visually, or you can use a shortcut. If you take a look here on the tool shelf, you will see that we have the 3 transformations. On the left, you have the move, rotate, and scale. Let me zoom there so you can take a look. Move, rotate, and scale. And this is quite straightforward. If you ever have had any experience, for instance, with SketchUp or 3ds Max, it will work in a very similar way. If I enable here the move tool, you will see that we will get this widget right here, and you can click and drag in either of the axes, the arrows. I have here the red arrow for the X axis, the green for Y, and the blue for Z. And if I click and drag, I can start moving this object around. Let me move it there. I can do the same for this sofa. I can move it around here on my scene. The same applies for rotation. If I click here, instead of arrows, you will see arcs, and you can rotate the object. And if I try, let me press Ctrl Z to undo this. And if you select this sofa here and you try the scale will give you handles. And if I press and click here on the x-axis, I can apply a scale on the x-axis only. I can apply another scale here on the z-axis to change the scale of this sofa. Let me press Ctrl Z. Now, since we'll be using Blender, or I guess you are trying to use or you want to use Blender to do architectural modeling, you will probably want to have numeric control over these transformations. And this is an excellent opportunity to explain about the operator panel in Blender. What is the operator panel in Blender? For many operations that you will do here in Blender, you will see a small menu here on the lower left side corner of your screen, which is the operator panel. This panel will assume different shapes or display different options depending on what you are trying to do in Blender. For instance, for transformations, it will give you an option to adjust the numeric transformation. Let's say I want to move this sofa here half a meter. So I will press, I will type 0.5, enter, and it will be able to control the distance. Let's say I want to move it on the y-axis. I will move it here. It will display the value here as 1.23. Let's say I just want 1 meter. Just replace the number, type 1, and it will update the distance. This is the operator panel. Now, one important thing about the operator panel. Once you select another object, it will disappear. Let's say I want to adjust that move transformation. I can't get the operator panel here again displaying that option. In some cases, if you press the F9 key, you will get back the operator panel. This time it worked. I can adjust here 1.5 and it will update the transformation, but it will only work if that was your last operation. If I try to move, for instance, this sofa here, it will display the option for that sofa, that model. I can update this to 3 meters, but I can't bring back the option for this sofa. For instance, if I try to press F9 now, it will display 3 meters because this was my last operation for this object and not this sofa. So keep that in mind. This is important because, as you will notice, when we start creating new objects, the operator panel will give you unique options when you create new objects, but they will be unavailable once you start doing anything else. So this is how to, one of the ways to get numeric control over transformations, and it works for move, rotate, and scale. Let's try to rotate this 45 degrees. I can move it here, and in the operator panel, I can just type 45, and it will give me numeric control over this transformation. Let me reset that to 0. And the same applies for scale. If I want, for instance, a scale transformation here on the x-axis, if I want to double the size of this object in the x-axis, I can just type 2 and it will double the size of the object in the x-axis. I can reset that by just typing 1 again. Now, this is one of the options to work with precise 3D transformations in Blender. What I usually recommend to my students or everyone that is trying to start with Blender for architectural design or architectural modeling is to use shortcuts, because it will give you an option to use direct numeric input, and you will see that it's really, really fast to make transformations using this method. Let me show you how it works. For instance, I will not use any of the options from the tool shelf. You can notice there, I'm not using either of them. And if I just click here on this sofa. How can I move this object? By pressing a shortcut. If I press the G key, it will start moving the object. If I press the R key, I will be able to rotate the object. And if I press the S key, it will give me an option to scale the object. So let me write here on the screen. You'll be using G, R, or S to make a transformation. So besides G, R, and S, is there anything else that I can do? For instance, if I press G and start moving my object around, you see that it's moving on random locations. How can I lock it, for instance, moving only on the X-axis? If you press any of these keys, either G, R, or S, and right after pressing these keys, you press X, Y, or Z, Blender will lock your transformation into that particular axis. For instance, let's try to move this sofa here on the Y-axis only. So press G and Y, and then you will be able to move your sofa on the Y-axis only. But this is not what I want to explain to you, or this is not how you use numeric input. The secret here, or the productivity secret here, is to just type the distance. You will see that when you start to do this, at the top center of your screen, you start to see this numeric value here, which is the value that you'll be using for your transformation. Now, if I type 1.5, you will see that Blender will use this as the input for your transformation. So you can start just typing things and pressing enter to accept the transformation. For instance, let's say I want to move, I will try to make 3 transformations in a row here. I will move the sofa in this direction on the X-axis, then in this direction, and then in this direction here. And in each one of them, I will be using a numeric input. So G, X, and then I will move it in this direction. It will be a negative X. So I'll be typing -3, enter. Then G, Y, -5, enter. G, X, 3, enter. You can see that it's quite fast to just type the transformation shortcut, the axis, and then the number that you need. Let's apply the same thing with rotation. Let's try to rotate this sofa here. R, Z, 45, enter. Quite fast to make a 45-degree transformation. You don't really need to use the operator panel for this, unless of course you don't want to type those numeric entries here for transformation. Press Ctrl Z to undo. The same thing applies for scale. Let's try to scale this sofa here by 2. Let's try to double the size of this sofa on the Y-axis. So S, Y, 2, enter, and you will be able to double the scale of the object on the Y-axis. With time, you start noticing that using this method by pressing a shortcut and typing the distance is the fastest way to manage and work with precise 3D modeling input here in Blender. For everything, not only for transformations, but you'll see that for extrudes, creating new objects, and 3D modeling in general will benefit a lot from this workflow. For the third part of lesson 3, I want to start talking about the snapping tools of Blender and how to manage 2 things. First one is the 3D cursor, and the second is the object origins. So let's get started. You now know how to manage and use transformations in Blender, so this is an important step. But doing transformations with only numeric input is part of the process. The second part, and this is a really major factor for transformations, is how to use the snapping tools. Blender offers two types of snapping systems. The first one, that is the transformation snapping, and the second one is the snapping related to the 3D cursor in general. If you look here at the top center of your user interface, you will see that we have the snapping options. You will be able to enable or disable the snapping by using Shift Tab or pressing this button here for the snap. Now, if you click here on this icon, Blender will display the options for the snap target. This is like the snapping options, for instance, from a CAD tool, options that you find in AutoCAD, SketchUp. And for instance, let's say I will turn on here the vertex. I will also want to use the edge center, which is something like the midpoint, edge perpendicular, and the center face, or the center point from a face with face center. If you want to enable multiple of them, just press and hold the Shift key and you can click on many of them. You can enable or you can turn on and off any of the options here by pressing and holding the Shift key and clicking on either of them. Now, if I click here to close this tool, but before we close that, let me just give you another overview here. By default, your snapping tools will only affect the move transformations. If you want to affect rotate or scale, you have to enable these buttons here as well. I will keep just the move tool enabled by now. If we need, you can always enable here the rotate and scale. So it means when you make a rotate transformation, Blender will ignore any of the snapping tools. Now, how can we use the snapping tools in a transformation? I have this simple scene here with two cubes, and I want to try to move these objects with precision by placing, for instance, I want to get this point here and I want to align it with this vertex. So what is the best way to do that? I have my snapping enabled. So let me try that. Select the object that you want to move, and as you will see, we have the snapping enabled. And I will try to place my cursor near or as close as possible to that vertex, press the G key, and then I will try to move it to my target location. And in here, you will start seeing one of the first problems that many people complain about Blender, which is this snapping mode will try to guess what is your destination, what is your origin and destination points. And I can't really get that location. To fix this, we have an option in Blender called Snap Base. The Snap Base will make Blender work as if it was a CAD tool. So to cancel or to skip this transformation, I will press ESC. You can do this in any transformation that you want. Just press ESC and it will cancel either move, rotate, or scale transformation. Now, I will try to do the same thing again, but I will be using the Snap Base. What is the secret? I will press G, and if I move my cursor, Blender will start moving my object around. But if I press the B key, if I press B, Blender will wait for a Snap Base. If you ever did, for instance, a transformation or a move, rotate, or scale in something like AutoCAD or any CAD software, you know that for those transformations, you can select an origin point and a destination point. The Snap Base will work the same way. Blender will ask us for an origin point, which is the Snap Base. I will select this point right here. You will see that the snapping will start looking for objects or references in the scene. And if you see a small square, this is a vertex. A triangle, it's the center from an edge. A circle will be the center of a face. So I will pick this point here and you'll see that Blender will give me the option to use this as the origin point. Now, if I move my cursor here, look how easy it is to just pick this second vertex as the destination, click there, and you are done. I just made this move using the snapping options alone. No need to enter numeric inputs or distances for this transformation. I will press Ctrl Z to go back. Let's try something else. I wanna try to align this. Let me create here. Let me increase the size of this cube, and I will try to do something different. Let's try to pick here the bottom center of this face, and I will try to align it here exactly at the top of this larger cube face, the top face of this larger cube. So what are the steps? If I select, of course, the object, I have my snapping enabled. Let me rotate or orbit my scene here. I want to grab the center point of this face, so I will press G, and then I will press the B key to grab the snap base, and since I have the face center enabled, I can click here and start moving my object around. Now I have a problem. If I try to orbit my scene, Blender will not give me the option to orbit. It will think that I want to lock my transformation. Using the middle mouse button is another way to lock your transformation. I need to orbit my scene to grab that location. Let me press ESC. And whenever you have this type of scenario or this type of task where you need to grab a point that you can really see, you can press and hold the Alt key during a transformation. When you press and hold the Alt key, you will be able to change the zoom, orbit, or change your point of view to select a point, to select a location or a reference that you can actually see right now. That's our case. If I press G, B, and I select here the center point, and if I press and hold the Alt key, I can orbit my scene. I can zoom out. I can press and hold the Shift key. I'm pressing Shift and Alt at the same time. And look how easy it is. I can clearly see the top face, and I can select the center point again. Let me zoom in. I'm pressing the Alt key again, and I can click there. Look how easy it was. When you know the shortcuts, the Alt key is the secret here to give you this option. Now, let's try to do this with a different type of snapping and changing. You will also learn how to manage the origin points of objects here in Blender. Let me press Ctrl Z. And if you take a closer look here, when you select an object in Blender, you will see a small orange dot. This orange dot is the origin point of the objects here in Blender. We have the orange dot here as well. Every object in Blender will display this origin point. The origin point is actually what you'll be looking at when you try to identify the coordinates of an object. For instance, I have this cube here selected, and if I zoom in here on the coordinates of this object, you will see that it's actually in the x minus 5.2, y0, and z0. What is the point that it's actually on those coordinates? It's the origin point. The origin point is important because this is also used as a pivot point for rotations and other operations in Blender. And one of the things that you will probably want to learn really early in the process of adapting your workflow to do architectural modeling in Blender is how to manage and control the origin point, because it will also work as if it was the insertion point for assets. For instance, if you have a furniture model that you want to insert into a scene, the origin point of this object will be used as the insertion point for that particular asset. Now, how can we move the origin point of an object? The best way to do this is by using another Blender feature called 3D cursor. If you look again here to my scene, you will see that we have this crosshair. This will be really important for the next part of this lesson, because this is where we'll start creating new objects in Blender. What is this crosshair? This is the 3D cursor. The 3D cursor is something unique to Blender. It has many different functions in Blender. It marks the location where you will be creating new objects. You can use that as a temporary pivot point for transformations, for scale or rotation. And you can use the 3D cursor as a reference to have precise control to reposition your origin point. Let me show you how it works. First, how can you move the 3D cursor? If you right-click anywhere on your scene while pressing the Shift key, you can reposition your 3D cursor. You also have a dedicated option here to manage the 3D cursor on the tool shelf. But most people just press and hold the Shift key and right-click. And if you have the snapping options from Blender enabled and you try to press and hold the Shift key and right-click near an object, Blender will align your 3D cursor to key points of that object. For instance, I'm just placing my 3D cursor here at the center location of this face. I can align my 3D cursor here to this vertex, to the center point of this face, and I can also place my 3D cursor here at the bottom, the center of this bottom face for this object. Now, when you have an object selected, like this one, you can manage the origin point location by coming here on the object menu, set origin, and you will see the list of options here. And one of them has origin to 3D cursor, so you can move your origin point to the 3D cursor location. Let's see how it works. For instance, if I select this option right now, take a closer look into this orange dot, object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor, it will move the origin point location and align it to the 3D cursor. If I move my 3D cursor here, for instance, go there, object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor, it will move the origin point there. Why is this a big deal? Because you can also use the origin point as a way to move things around using the 3D cursor snapping. Let me show you one example. I'll try to do the exact same thing that I did earlier when I moved this smaller cube and placed it right here. So I will move my origin point, or the origin point for this object, and align it with the bottom of this, the bottom face, the center of this bottom face, and I will just go to the object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. The origin point is there. Now I will place the 3D cursor here at the top of this face. Again, I have my snapping options enabled, so it's quite easy to just select either a vertex or the center point here. Now, what are the 3D cursor snapping options? If you press Shift S or open here the object, snap, this will give you a different list of snapping options here in Blender. And you will see that we have the 3D cursor as one of the options here from the list. You can use selection to cursor. This will move the selected object to the 3D cursor location, or the opposite, which is cursor to selected. And what is the point that will be used to move the object? the origin point. So let's see how it works. I will select this smaller object, press Shift S, and I will choose here from the same set of options, selection to cursor. And if I go there, you'll see that it will move the object and align the origin point to the 3D cursor location. If the 3D cursor is here, press Shift S again, selection to cursor, it will align the origin point to the 3D cursor location. Let's align the 3D cursor here to the midpoint, to the center point of this edge, press Shift S, selection to cursor, and it will move it there. The same applies, for instance, if I try to go with the opposite, press Shift S, cursor to selected, the 3D cursor will jump to the origin point of the selected object. So this is a big list of options related to using the snapping and also the 3D cursor, which we will use a lot during the next videos and lessons. Now that you know how to use the snapping, how to use the 3D cursor, the snapping for the 3D cursor, and how to manage object origins, it's time to begin lesson 4. This will be the first section from lesson 4, where I will teach you how to create new objects in Blender. And before explaining how to create new objects, let's learn how to delete them. Is there any secret? Is there any trick to remove objects from the scene here in Blender? Actually, no. I will just explain 2 different options that you have to remove objects from your scene. First one is, and the easiest one, is to select an object and pressing the delete key. This will remove the object from your scene. Now, another option is to select the object and instead of pressing delete, you'll be using the X key. When you press X, Blender will prompt you before removing anything from the scene. So this is just a safety measure in case you don't want to accidentally delete things from your scene. Use the X key and it will ask you for confirmation to remove anything from your project, from your scene. Now, how can we create new objects here in Blender? Before we learn how to create new objects in Blender, let me just give you a quick explanation about the Blender workflow, which is quite different. For instance, if you are coming from SketchUp, 3ds Max, AutoCAD, if you are used to do your architectural modeling work there, it's different, for instance, from Rhino. If you are used to do your architectural work in one of those softwares, you will find that Blender has a unique workflow in comparison to them. For instance, there, if you want to create a cube, you can draw a rectangle or create a rectangular base or a square, and from that square, you will add a height. You can also create a cube here in Blender in this with this type of workflow. You can create a plane and extrude it. But Blender uses something called subdivision modeling as their core modeling workflow, which means you will always start from a 3D primitive, and this 3D primitive will have it will have predefined measurements. It will have a predefined size, and from that object you will start working with modifiers. You will make modifications in edit mode to reshape it into something else. So get used to this workflow. Now, how can we create new objects here in Blender? You have to go to the Add menu, and in here, this is one of the options. You can use the mesh group here to create new mesh objects. For instance, if you want to create a new cube, select a new cube here. If you want to create a curve, you can create curves, you can create text, you can create lights, you can create a new camera, among other types of objects. For instance, if I select a new cube here, Blender will create a new cube object. And if you want to create another one, press and hold the Shift key, right click here, it will move the 3D cursor, and from here you can add a new cube. But Using the add menu, it's not really the best way to do this, because it will take you time to place your cursor there, open the menu, select what you want. What most people do in Blender is pressing the Shift A key. When you press Shift A, it will open the same panel here to create new objects. And by the way, Shift A, it's a really important shortcut because it will give you access to the add menu from many different editors. For instance, if I use here the shader editor, if you press Shift A, it will open a similar menu, but with nodes to edit materials. So keep that in mind. Shift A, it's a really important shortcut for Blender. Now, if you keep moving here the 3D cursor, again, press and hold Shift and right click. Shift A, let's add a cylinder. I can move my 3D cursor here, Shift A, circle. It will keep creating new objects. And as I was explaining, Blender will use those 3D primitives as the starting point to create new objects. For instance, if you want to resize this cube here to create a wall, you can use the dimensions panel here. This is one of the ways. And resize this to 0.15, for instance, set a length here of 6 meters and the height to 2.7. Just move it here. Just set this cube as a wall segment. You can create a plane, Shift A, plane. Let's apply a scale. I will turn the snapping that you already know how to use it. Let me enable here the vertex, select or wall, G, B for snap base. I will grab this point and move it here. So look how you can start building things here in Blender. Now, one thing that a lot of people do, including myself included, is using an add-on to expand the options that we have to create new objects here in Blender. If you press Shift A, you will see that we have a limited group of objects that you can create here in Blender. There is a free add-on called Extra Mesh Objects that will give you a lot more options. How to install it? Quite easy. Go to the Edit, Preferences, and here under Get Extensions, you can type there Extra. I already have that. Let me just type it again so you can see both add-ons here. We have one for mesh objects and one for curve objects. I'll be using this for mesh objects. And since I already have that installed, I don't see here an install button, but in your case, you can press the install button to add it to your Blender. Since I already have that installed, I will just enable the add-on. I will be using the add-ons tab, and there it is, Extra Mesh Objects. Let me enable it. And I will zoom out here. And if I press Shift A again, you will see that it will add a lot more options here in my mesh menu. For instance, you can create a new object based on a single vertex, which is quite useful in case you want to draft objects or create, for instance, in case you want to trace the shape of a reference that you import from AutoCAD, from SketchUp. You can create new objects here. Let me show here in the extras. You have a beam factory. You have a wall factory, which is not really that much useful for architecture. Let me show you what it creates. It creates this type of wall. Not really that much useful, but it's there. If you want to create a beam here, let me go to extras, beam, and it will create a beam object. You can adjust the shape, size, height here using the operator panel. You have different profiles here for this beam. So this is the extra mesh objects. And this is how you create new objects here in Blender. Press Shift A, select the primitive object that you want to use, and you can begin adding new shapes for here in your scenes. Let's go to section 2, lesson 4, where I will explain once again how to manage and use the operator panel. This is not really an instruction, but just a reminder, because I already talked about the operator panel, but it's now even more important for us because you just learned how to create a new object in Blender, and a few options will be only available from the operator panel. For instance, if you create something like a cylinder, let's add here, let's press Shift A and go here and select cylinder. As you will notice here, if you zoom in, you will be able to edit or change a few settings from your cylinder. Most of these options, they will be available in the operator panel, and they will be there right after you create the object. One downside of using Blender for this type of 3D modeling is that Blender is it's not a parametric 3D modeling software. So what does that mean? For instance, Blender do not know that this object right here, it's a cylinder. It knows right now because you just created the object. Once you start doing something else or create another object, Blender will forget that this is a cylinder. It will be just a mesh object, a collection of vertices, edges, and faces. It will have no idea that this is a cylinder. And let me show you what that means by making some changes here to this cylinder. For instance, it will start with 32 sides. Let's change this to 12. The radius will be 0.75, and the height here will be 1.85. So we made some changes to the cylinder. Great, fine, it's working. Now I will move this cylinder to this location here, and I will add another object. Let's add here, for instance, something like a cone. And I will make changes here, 16 sides. Radius 1 will be 2 meters. Radius 2 will be 1 meter. And the height will be 0.75. Great. Made my changes here, my adjustments to the cone. Now I just remembered that I really need this cylinder here. To have, instead of 12 sides, I need it to with 20 sides. I want to make a change to that cylinder. So if you take a look here, you don't really see anymore the operator panel. It's not there. How can I make this cylinder here with how can I change the cylinder to have 20 sides instead of 12? You can't. You have to delete the object and create it again. There is a way to bring back the operator panel, which is pressing the F9 key. When you press F9, it will bring the last operation. Since the last thing that I did here was moving this cone object, this is showing the move options from the cone. For instance, if I want to change here the coordinate or the distance that I use to move the object, I can make that. I can do that in this operator panel, but I can't really change the cylinder. So I have to remove or delete the cylinder. Press Shift A again. Let's go with cylinder. Blender will remember the last settings. As you can see here, it's using 12, 0.75, and for the depth, 1.85. And right now I can just press 20 and make and change the number of sides of this cylinder. If I start selecting things here and accidentally close the operator panel, I can press F9 and it will bring back the cylinder. And this is, I can make changes to the cylinder right now because I didn't do anything here. I didn't made any transformations. I didn't create a new object. Pressing F9 will bring the last operation. And as long as your last operation is adding the object that you want to edit, you can bring back the operator panel. This is an important concept because you can't go back and make changes into an object as soon as you start doing something else. So keep that in mind when you create new objects in Blender. Blender is not parametric. It won't remember what is the starting point for your mesh objects. And the next step is work modes. Let's learn how to use work modes in Blender. And what are work modes? Until this point in the course, we used object mode in Blender. What is object mode? If you take a look into the top left of your screen, you will see that Blender has right here a work mode selector, and we are right now in object mode. And as the name implies, it's a mode where you will be managing, selecting, and transforming objects as a single entity. If you want to edit or modify the shape of the objects, remember what I said about the Blender workflow? This will be done in edit mode. And how can we change to edit mode? Quite simple. Just click here, select an object first, click here and choose a different mode. And as you see here, you have object mode, edit mode, sculpt, vertex, weight paint, and texture paint. Those are all different types of modes that you can activate for a mesh object. Depending on what you have selected, Blender will display different types of modes. For instance, I don't have any cameras here. Let me quickly add a camera. And if you try to expand these options, you will see that a camera only has object mode because you can't really edit a camera in the same way as a mesh object. Now, what can we do with or in edit mode? If you select a mesh object and change here to edit, you will see that you will have access to managing the vertices, edges, or faces of an object. This is a great time to change your shading. As you will see here, we have options to change the shading of our objects here. This is the menu where you can change the shading. For instance, you can select here wireframe. You can select here solid mode, which was the mode that we were using until this point. You can go to material preview. We don't have any materials on our objects at the moment. That's why they are showing up as white with this white color. And you can preview your render. This will give you something like a real-time render here on your scene. And if you want to use something like I'm doing here, which is random colors for your 3D objects, you can expand this button here with viewport shading and enable this option right here, which is object color, and choose random. I'm using random colors for the objects here on my 3D viewport. Now, if you select an object here again and go to edit mode, you'll see that you can select, for instance, the vertices. You can use the same shortcuts, the same methods to select objects. I'm pressing and holding the shift key, and from this point, for instance, let's select these two vertices, press G, Z, and you can deform that. You can use the snapping. Let's select this face here. I will enable here the edge center and the vertex. I will press G, B to grab here a snap base, and I want to move this up until it finds here the midpoint or the center point for this edge. And notice something about this object that I just made this small edit. I moved the vertices, but the origin point remained in the same spot. This is the dot, the small orange dot that marks the object origin point. And if I go back to object mode, it will be there. So keep that in mind. If you want to reset that, for instance, I want to place my origin point here. Let me move. I have the vertex here enabled. I will align my 3D cursor there. Object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. And I just fixed the origin point location for this object. Now, as in any other or in many different tools or workflows in Blender, you have a shortcut that will help you to go to edit mode. And most of the time that will be working in Blender, you will be switching between object and edit mode. And for that, we have a shortcut, which is the tab key. If you press tab on your keyboard, you can easily change between object and edit mode. Select any mesh object or any object in Blender and press tab to go into object mode. If you want, you can select more than one object. I have two objects here selected. Press tab, and I'm in edit mode for both of them. When you are in edit mode, you will also notice that you have this option here right next to the selector, where you can choose if you want to use, for instance, or if you want to select a vertex, an edge, or a face. Depending on what you want. For instance, I want to select a face. Just click on any face here from the objects, and Blender will add that to the selection. You can change here to vertex or to edge, and you will be able to grab the edge of any object that you have here on your screen. And you can also change to vertex. This way you can select one, two vertices. You can keep pressing here with you can press and hold the shift key, and you can keep clicking to select multiple vertices here on the screen. So you can easily change what type of object or entity here that you want to select from edit mode, from the mesh object that you are editing. The same applies for instance, for curve objects. Let's try to edit a curve here. I will move my 3D cursor here, press Shift A, curve, Bezier, and as you will notice, Blender will add this predefined shape. This is a Bezier curve, but you will only see the control points and handlers for a Bezier curve once you go into edit mode. If I press tab, you will see that we have here the control points and the handlers. I can press the G key here to move things and deform this Bezier curve to many different shapes. So this is the basic workflow that you can use in any 3D modeling workflow in Blender or architecture. Add a primitive shape, go into edit mode. You will be using Extrude, a lot of different tools that we'll be learning later, and you will reshape the object until you get something like a wall, of door, window, roof, slab, anything that you want to create here for your architectural, for your 3D modeling in architectural visualization. And now that you already know how to use edit mode, I think it's a great time to talk about the scale problem in Blender and how to fix it. First, what is the scale problem? Let me remove everything here from my scene, and I will add with a Shift A new cube. And as you will notice, if you open the 3D viewport sidebar with the N key, you'll see that Blender will create this cube with the default measurements, 2 meters for each one of the sides. So this is the default settings for the cube. Now, If I resize this option or this model, I can set this, for instance, the X dimension here to 3 meters, the Y to 6 meters, and the Z to 2.95 meters. So I just resized this object. Now, one thing that I want to call your attention is the scale factor that Blender will add to these objects. And as you can see, we have one scale factor for X, one scale factor for Y, and one scale factor for Z. When you are working in 3D modeling software that has a CAD background, for instance, SketchUp, AutoCAD, Rhinoceros, 3ds Max. 3ds Max will give you a way to use these scale factors, but this is not quite common for SketchUp, Rhinoceros, AutoCAD, and others. Why do we have a scale factor here, and what is the purpose of this scale factor? One thing that I want to remind you is that Blender was never designed to be a CAD tool or never designed to be an architectural software. We are using it as an architectural tool because it's free and it's open source, and it gives us a lot of useful tools. But at its core, it's an animation software. This is the purpose of Blender, and those scale factors, they work great for animation, but they don't really help us that much with architectural 3D modeling. In fact, they can cause a lot of trouble or confusion if you don't know how to manage them. For instance, if you try to measure the distance here or the size of this object using the measure tool, since I'm using the snapping here, you don't really have to press and hold the Control key to use the measure. So if I try to measure the height, 2.95, great, it matches. This is exactly what we did here when changing the dimensions. If I try to measure here the width, 3 meters, matches. This is what we want. However, there is another way to measure distances here in Blender. I don't remember if I already explained this, but I guess not, because this will require you to go into edit mode. If you go into edit mode, you will have access here on this panel to the mesh edit mode overlays. And in the mesh edit mode overlays, we have a panel here just for measurements. And one of the options is edge length. If I enable the edge length, you will see the distance or the measurement for each one of your selected edges. And at this point, you probably spotted something really strange. If you take a look, all of our edges here, they are showing up with 2 meters, which it's quite strange. Why is that? Because we are using a scale factor. The core reason to not being able to display or view the current sizes of the objects here, it's because we are using a scale factor. And how to fix this? Is there a way to fix? How do we reset that? There is an easy fix. Whenever you apply a scale to an object here in Blender, you have to reset the scale factor. And you reset that by pressing Ctrl A or going to the object, apply, and choose scale. You will see that you can apply here not only the scale, but you can apply rotation. There is even an option to apply both of them at the same time, because in many cases you'll be making a rotation to an object and you want to reset that rotation to make it the actual position of the object with no unapplied rotation to the object. It can cause problems later when you are using something like modifiers or constraints to create animations here in Blender. So, easy fix, press Ctrl A and apply scale. Take a look into the scale factor panel there. Look what will happen when I select scale. They will all reset to 1. You will even see Blender display a warning here on the lower left corner. You will see that Blender will highlight here with a warning that one of the selected objects has a non-uniform scale, and by non-uniform scale it has a scale factor different from 1. And when we apply the scale with Ctrl A, this warning will disappear. It won't be there anymore. With Ctrl A, you can reset not only the scale factor, but rotation, as I was explaining. For instance, let's say I want to rotate this in the x-axis 90 degrees, and I want this position here, this alignment of this object to be their current alignment. And if you take a look here, we have a 90-degree rotation to the object. If I press Ctrl A and choose rotation, it will reset the rotation of the object, and this will be the current position and alignment of this object. So this is how you reset the scale factor. And now if I go to edit mode, you will see that all of the edges, they are displaying the correct length for each one of them. And since we are here in edit mode, and I just explained about the measurement section here, you have other useful options here. For instance, you can measure lengths, you can measure angles. You'll see the angles here for edges. You can measure here the face area. This will give you the face area. And you will also have the face angle, the angle that each one of the faces is making with their neighbors. So this is how you manage and fix the scale problem in Blender. Let's begin lesson 5, first section of lesson 5, and it's time to start working with architectural 3D modeling. And what is the first thing that we'll learn how to create here in Blender? Walls. Let me explain how to create walls using the Extrude tool from here in Blender. And again, if you are coming from other 3D packages that are quite common in architectural modeling like SketchUp, AutoCAD, 3ds Max, Rhinoceros, you probably used Extrude before, maybe with a different name, like in SketchUp you call Extrude push-pull. But the concept, it's exactly the same. You create a 2D shape, and from that 2D shape you will pull that selection, and you will create a 3D object from there. Let me show you how it works here in Blender, and I will start with a plane. This is a personal choice. You can begin with a cube, you can begin with many different shapes here in Blender. But for me, I like to start with a plane because you can create a base for your layout, for your rooms. And from that shape, you will extrude that to add some height to your object, to your architectural design. Now, let's imagine here that you want to begin working with walls. And like I said, I will start with a plane. So press Shift A and add a plane. And as you can imagine, this plane will use Blender default sizing, 2 meters by 2 meters. And again, since we are starting a new project, one thing that you have to adjust here, it's time to adjust, it's the units. I'll be using meters, but in case you are using any other unit, in case you want to work with centimeters, meters, or feet, inches, this is the time to make that change. Now, Blender will create this plane with 2 by 2 meters. Let's change this to 0.15 and 0.15 here. So we will have a plane with the approximate thickness of a brick wall, 15 centimeters. And if you remembered one of my previous videos, we need to reset the scale to avoid the scale problem. So I will press Shift A, and you will see that I will reset the scale factor. So choose scale, and we have the scale factor reset. Now I want to start using the Extrude tool here in Blender, and the Extrude tool will be available to you here in Blender when you go to Edit mode. If you press Tab and go to Edit mode, you will see that a lot of the tools in the tool shelf here, they will change. Let me press Tab again. You will see that Blender will change the tools. A lot of them will disappear if you go to Object mode, and one of them is the Extrude. And in Blender, you can extrude shapes using two basic methods. The first one, of course, is using this icon here, and the second is with a shortcut. There are other ways, but let's focus on those two. Now, if you decide to use this option here, you will see that Blender will display this gizmo here, and I can click at the gizmo and I will extrude the shape. It will work in a very similar way to what you have in SketchUp with the push-pull. 3ds Max also has something like this with the extrude option. But in here, you'll be using the gizmo, and you can set a height for this extrude using the operator panel. Let's say I need this to be 0.3 meters or 30 centimeters. You would make this change in the operator panel. Now, as you can imagine, I'll be using the shortcut, because using the shortcut it's way faster than using this this icon here with the gizmo. And by the way, you can expand this option here to review more extrude tools. You see that we have an extrude region, extrude manifold, which by the way is very similar to what SketchUp does with the push-pull. You have the extrude along normals, extrude individual, and extrude to cursor. I will explain the extrude manifold later, but let's focus on extrude region, which is the most common type of extrude that we'll be using in Blender. What is the shortcut to use an extrude here in Blender? It's the E key. If you press E with either a vertex, an edge, or a face selected, you will be extruding that shape. For instance, if I select just one vertex and press the E key, I will extrude that vertex and I will create an edge with that. Let me press ESC, Ctrl Z. I will select here an edge, press extrude or E, and I will create a plane based on that. Press ESC, Ctrl Z. I will explain why I'm pressing Ctrl Z in a moment. If I select this face and press E, I will extrude and create a volumetric shape. Press ESC, Ctrl Z. Now, why am I pressing Ctrl Z? Because when you start an extrude with the shortcut, you will create a copy of the exact shape that you are extruding, that you are selecting, and you will immediately start a transformation. So if I press here the Y key, I can limit my extrude to the Y axis. And if I click here, for instance, I will finish my extrude and it will be there. This will be the position, the size, or the length of the extrude. Now, if I press Ctrl Z or ESC before I click anywhere to finish this extrude, I will cancel the transformation, but not the extrude. What does that mean? It means that you will have the geometry of that extrude there overlapping with the previous selection, so you have duplicated geometry. Is that bad? Yes. Later on, depending on what you want to do here with this model, you will probably find a lot of problems. For instance, if this is something that you are trying to model to create, for instance, a furniture piece where you need to smooth this surface, you will find artifacts, 3D artifacts that will make it look weird. You might find problems, for instance, when using modifiers, because you will have faces there with a size, with a scale of 0. So you will have a lot of problems if you don't press Ctrl Z. That's why if you cancel an extrude, I strongly advise you to either press Ctrl Z, or later you have to select everything like I'm doing right now. Right click with vertex mode selected, and you have to choose this option here, merge vertices by distance. This will merge all of the vertices that are overlapping. You will see here, for instance, that I just removed 2 vertices. Blender will show at the bottom that it removed 2 vertices. So keep that in mind. This is something that a lot of people that are starting with Blender will forget, and later on they will start looking at some weird behavior when adding modifiers or trying to do simple tasks like cutting your model. And Blender will not cut the entire model because your loop your edge loop will be interrupted by a face that that was not supposed to be there. Now we have our plane here, and I will start working on my walls. I will select this edge here at the top, and I will press the E key to start an extrude. It will start creating here this shape. I will press the Y key to limit my extrude to the Y axis. And then you can use that same numeric input method that we used in a previous lesson. Just type the length of your extrude. For instance, I can use here 3.5 meters. Press enter. Just type 3.5, and you just created a wall with 3.5 meters. Let's measure from this point to this point. Actually, it's not from here. It's from here. And as you can see, I have an extrude with 3.5 meters. Let me remove this ruler. And I will keep this edge here selected. I will press extrude again, E again, Y, let's use 0.15, and then I will select this edge here, extrude, X now, and I will type 1.5. Let's say I will add a window at this location, so I will create an extrude with 2 meters, extrude X 2 meters, extrude X 1.5. Now I want here at this location to create the gap for a door. So I will select this edge, extrude X, and then I will type 0.15. Since I want a gap, you have 2 options here to start creating this gap. You will either work with an extrude, and then later you will remove the face, or you can also duplicate this edge. So I'm in edit mode, press Shift D, X, and then let's say I will create a door with 80 centimeters. So I can type 0.8, enter. And from here, I will keep creating my extrudes. Extrude X. Now, as you can notice, I'm using the snapping tool here at the top. And I want to create another space here to create add a window later. I already have this window here at the top marked, so I can use the snapping tool from Blender to capture this point with no need to type a length. And as you can see here, I just created an extrude, same sizing. They are perfectly aligned just using the snapping tools. So press extrude again, the E key, X to limit or extrude to the X axis. Let me click at this vertex. I will repeat the same process, extrude X here. And I will select these two edges, extrude X 0.15. And if you want, you can now select this edge here, and in edit mode, one useful shortcut, it's the F key. When you have two vertices selected and press the F key, Blender will connect them with an edge. If you have two edges selected and press F, Blender will connect them with a face. This is really useful when doing architectural 3D modeling here in Blender. And we just drafted the basis for a simple room. So you can keep that in mind when you are starting working with architectural modeling. You can use the extrude to draft the base of your main shape, and from that main shape we will later add some height with, again, another extrude. In the next video, I will keep developing this shape here that we'll be creating in Blender. Now let's keep developing our project here, and I just created this draft for a simple room. And let's imagine that I want to add another room right next to it. So my plan here is to add another room right here. Don't mind my perfect skills here drawing with the mouse. And I want to add another room like this. So we need to make a few changes. First, I will expand my extrude here. So let me select this two or this edge. You can select an edge by picking two vertices. And I will use the extrude Y again. And we can use something like 3 meters. Extrude Y 0.15 again. And from here, I will extrude this edge and this edge, extrude X, and let's create this with 3 meters, extrude X 0.15, and I will select this edge and press the F key again. Now I just realized something. We forgot to add a door here, so people will need to go inside this room, and we didn't add any windows here, no windows. So how can we add these windows? And let's imagine that I want to use the exact same dimensions here. I want to try or explore a few options related to CAD modeling in Blender. For instance, I just added this segment here to create a window, and I want to copy this segment to use as a reference to include it here. Shift D, I will place it right here. Now, what I want, I don't have any idea what is the measurement. I know, but because I just typed the distance, it has 3 meters, but let's pretend that I don't know. I don't have any idea what is the length for this wall here. What I want is to place this segment here that marks the location of a window exactly at the center of this edge. And what is the procedure to do that? You have two options, and one of the easiest methods here is with the snapping, because if you don't remember, we have in the snapping tools from Blender the option to use the edge center. Since we do have an edge here, the process is quite simple. Select the object that you want to move, press G, then B, and you will capture with the triangle here the edge center. and it will place it in the other edge center right here. You can select this bottom face, press delete or X and choose faces. You will see the gap here. Just select this edge, press F, select both edges on the other side, F, and you will get yourself this gap here for a window in the exact middle location of that wall. Now let's do something else. Let's use another method. Let's imagine here that you do not have this face. We have a gap there. And I want to do something like that, but I don't really have this object here. So the best option in this case is, of course, to create a new edge and align it with the snap. Let me select these just two vertices, select this face, G, B, and you will move it like this. Easy. Now, there is another option. This is what I want to explain, which is how to place this face here in the middle location using the 3D cursor. But to do this, I will need to separate this object. Let's imagine that this is a separate object, and to separate objects here in Blender, in edit mode, what does the separate means? It means Blender will create a new object based on what you have selected. I will press the P key. When you press P, Blender will ask you to how do you want to separate what you have selected. You can separate by selection, by material, or by loose parts. I will separate it with selection. So it means Blender will create a new object. You can see here that our object is separated from the base walls. And if you don't remember, when we have this object separated, it will inherit the origin point from the initial object. So you can see here that our origin point is right here. So I will select all vertices, press Shift S, and choose cursor to select it. The 3D cursor will align to this new object. And I will go to the object, set origin to 3D cursor. I will select our walls again, and I will select these two edges. Why am I selecting those? Because I will align the 3D cursor to them, and the 3D cursor will be placed in the exact center between those two edges. Shift S, cursor to selected. So with the 3D cursor there, and remember, when you move an object to the 3D cursor location, it will use the origin point. So this method will only work if you have the origin point at the exact center of the object that you want to move. In this case, I will select this plane here, press Shift S, selection to cursor, and it will go exactly to the location where we where we want this place to mark the location of a window. I know it sounds like a lot of steps, especially this last one, but when you have separated objects, this is one of the best ways to place them in the exact middle point between two vertices or two edges. This works in a very similar way to what we have, for instance, in AutoCAD. We have a snap like this called mid between 2 points, where you select 2 points and you can grab the exact middle location between those two endpoints or these 2 points. Now, I just placed this face here, but I need to join them together. You use the P key to separate, and to join them you'll be using the Ctrl J. And Ctrl J and the P key, they are all available here from the object menu. Let me show here. You have the join, Ctrl J, And the separate is right. Let me find it here. Oh, sorry, the separate, it's on edit mode. It's on mesh, separate. Again, this will only appear in edit mode. In object mode, you won't be able, you can't separate anything in object mode. Now I will select first this object here. Remember the concept of active object? Well, I'll be using it right now because I want to join this object here and this object, and I want the final layout or the final object to be, or to use everything that we have, or all of the properties from the wall, the large object. So I will keep that selected as the last one. Select first the small one, then the last one will be this large wall. Press Ctrl J and you will see that everything will remain with the same color. This is a visual feedback that everything is now using the properties of this object. If I invert the selection, select this one as the last one, press Ctrl J, look how the color will change, and all of the properties of the object, including the origin point, will now be from this last selected object. This is one of the many use cases of the active object in Blender, one of the concepts that I explained in one of the first lessons. Let me press Ctrl Z here. I will select these two again, Ctrl J, and I will connect these two edges, press F, these two edges here, press F, and now I'll just open the space here for a door, and I will create the door right here. Let me remove this face, press X, select this edge here, extrude Y 0.15, Shift D to make a copy, Shift D, Y 0.8, and then I will select these two edges, press F, and connect both of them. And there we have it. We have the base of our walls, and I explained to you how to manage window openings and a few options to locate the exact middle location of a wall, and how to use the 3D cursor to align the same plane here in case you want, in case you have separated objects to align and find the center point. And for section 3 of lesson 5, we'll be adding height to this flat design here. You can see that we just drafted the basis for this room. And I'll be using, again, an extrude, but selecting the face or faces here as your base, as your selected entity. Press the A key to select everything and start using, start adding your first extrude. So press E and start your first extrude. To add height for walls, I usually go with 2 extrudes. You will see why in a moment. Start with 1 extrude with 1 meter, press 1 and enter. This will be your first extrude. Now for the second extrude, what I usually do here is I will remove from the selection all of the faces marking windows. We have this one here, we have another one here, and another one here. You can see that we have 4 faces here marking windows. So I will press and hold the Shift key, and I will deselect them. Oh, I had my edge mode selected here by mistake. I will go back to face, and how can I quickly select everything again? I just removed everything from the selection. No panic. Let me show you how you can easily select everything. Set your view to front, type the number 1 on your numeric keyboard, change your shading to wireframe and draw a selection box, just enough to capture the top faces. And as you can see here, I just selected my top faces, everything. Go back to solid mode, and by the way, you can use Shift Z to quickly switch between wireframe and solid, and if you press the Z key, just Z, you will be opening this radio menu here where you can quickly choose between wireframe or solid. Now press and hold the Shift key, make sure you have your face mode selected only, and I will click on this face, this face, this face here, and this face. Now I will do more 2 extrudes here. Extrude, press the E key again and type 1. And now I will go with another extrude. Extrude, and I will be using 0.7 for this one. So I just did 2 extrudes. But let's imagine here that I forgot that the first extrude that I did was supposed to be 1.2 meters. So let me measure what is the distance that I used. 1 meter. So I just realized, well, I got this wrong. It was supposed to be 1.2. Do I have to press Ctrl Z and do everything again? No, we can just go with a quick edit. Let me delete this ruler. I will set my view to, or my selection mode to vertex. And here's what I'll be doing. Set your view to front, type the number 1 on your numeric keyboard, and change your shading to wireframe. Why do we have to change the shading to wireframe? Let me show you what will happen if we try to select everything here in solid mode. If I try to select these edges here or these vertices, just to move things around, you will see that Blender will not select everything. In fact, when you try to do this, Blender will only select what you can see. If you have vertices occluded behind a surface, Blender will ignore them if you are in solid mode. The solution, or the solution for this is to use either wireframe mode or to enable X-ray mode. If you look here on your shading selector, you have this button here which has a name of X-ray mode, and when you enable X-ray mode, you will be able to see everything, or it will be semi-transparent, your faces, and you will be able to select faces, edges, or vertices that are behind surfaces. So if I try to do the exact same thing again with X-ray mode enabled, you will see that Blender will select everything. If I try to do the exact same thing, but now in wireframe mode, it will work the same way. So whenever you have to do something like this, select an entire row or an entire set of vertices. Make sure you are in either X-ray mode or wireframe to make sure you select everything. Now, I need to move everything here, or my entire selection, 20 centimeters up in the Z axis. Press G, Z, and you can type 0.2, enter. And this is what we get. But I also need to move this row here, or this collection of vertices. So press G, Z, 0.2. And this is what we get. If we go to solid mode, this will be something like a stretch in a CAD software. You can easily reshape or reposition, change the dimension, update the dimensions of objects by just selecting the vertices and moving things around. Now, a few details missing here. We have our shape, but we still have a few gaps to close. For instance, if I select these two faces here, if I press the F key, Blender will try to connect them, but it won't work because those are two faces. To connect faces, Blender has a dedicated tool called Bridge Faces. And it's not with the F key that we will trigger that, it's with the right mouse button. Make sure you are in face select mode, right click, and you will find here in the context menu the Bridge Faces option. If you select the Bridge Faces, Blender will connect both of them, and you can repeat the same thing with all of the parts of this model. Bridge Faces, right click, and Bridge Faces. Bridge Faces. Right click, Bridge Faces. And there we have it. We have our, oh, I forgot one. This one here. Right click, Bridge Faces. And we have the basis of our interior model. Let's create now a floor slab. And one of the good things of having a 3D model like this is that you don't really have to type dimensions anymore or lengths because everything is set. Since we do need to create a floor slab, we can use the walls as a reference here in Blender. And I just explained how to use the P key to separate objects, and we'll just create a separated entity here to start our floor slab. And the technique is quite simple. Change your selection mode to vertex and select one vertex from each one of the corners here that will define your floor slab. I will select this one here. Let me just highlight the selection so you, in case you miss it where I click it. This is all the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vertices that I selected. And with those objects selected, you will press Shift D. Let me click here, Shift D. Blender will start to create a copy of these vertices. Press ESC, because we want to create the copy at the exact same location, and then press the P key to separate this vertex into a new object. And if I go now to object mode and try to separate, you'll see that since we have this object with a vertex only, Blender will create these small dots or these small squares marking the location of the object. And if I go to edit mode, select this square and go to edit mode by pressing tab, I can easily select, for instance, these two here and press the F key to connect them. These two here, press the F key. I actually want to remove this edge here. X edges, I will start creating an extrude from this side. So select this edge here and extrude. Make sure you have your snapping enabled and lock the snapping or the extrude to the X axis. Press X, click here, and I will press extrude X, click at this point, select this vertex, extrude Y, and go up to that point. Press A to select everything, and we will remove all of the duplicated vertices here. Right click and choose Merge Vertices by Distance. Blender will remove 3 vertices And as you can see here, we already have our shape with the correct sizing. Press extrude, and we will extrude that in this direction. So it will be 0.1, just 10 centimeters. And we have our floor slab. Now, in case you don't want to have overlapping faces, because the base of the wall, we have faces here at the base, you can easily remove them if you want. This is not a requirement. Let me change here my shading to wireframe. And if you look below our walls, you can easily here press X, faces, and Blender will remove the faces so you won't have overlapping faces. I usually don't do this, just in case you want your model to not do not have any overlapping faces. This is just an option. I usually keep them like this. So look how fast it was to create the floor slab. Just use what you already have and you will be able to quickly make those changes or create new objects here, derivated objects from what you have already in your design. One last thing that I want to explain in lesson 5 is how to use the Extrude manifold, which, like I said on one of the first sections of this lesson, looks like a lot to what we have in SketchUp with the push-pull tool. And one of the main benefits of this extrude option is that it will give you a way to quickly make changes to your 3D objects or to your 3D models here. For instance, let's say you need to make changes to your door height. And the easiest way to do this, let me enable here the X-ray mode. I will select this face here, and if you want to extrude this or if you want to move this, look how messy it will be if I just try to move this up or down. It will basically stretch everything here. If I try to extrude it up or down, it will create new geometry. Let me press Ctrl Z. Now if you want to move things here and make Blender to adjust automatically your 3D objects, you need to use the Extrude manifold. Let me apply the Extrude manifold here on a separate object. It will be easier for you to understand. Then I will apply that to our object. Now, if I select the top face here, apply an extrude, and let me select this face here. For instance, let's say I want to extrude this face here into this direction. If I try with a simple extrude, press the E key and try to move it in this direction, you will see that Blender will not erase these extra faces here. So you will end up needing to remove this later manually. Let me remove this, press Ctrl Z. Now we can try the same thing with the Extrude manifold. Is there a shortcut for the Extrude manifold? Unfortunately, no. You have to open the Extrude menu. And to open the Extrude menu, you have to press Alt E. When you press Alt E, you will see a list with many different types of extrudes, and among them, you will find the Extrude manifold. If I select Extrude manifold, I will be able to do the exact same thing, and notice the difference. Blender will remove the extra faces that we had here before. So with the Extrude manifold, Blender will cut and resize your object based on the type of extrude that you are doing. We don't have that face anymore here, and here the Extrude Manifold took care of them, removing and cutting all the necessary faces. So let's try to apply the exact same thing into our model. Let me erase this, and I will try to use the Extrude Manifold here. Enable the X-ray mode so I can easily select this face. And with Alt E, you can enable the Extrude Manifold, and you will see that I can easily move things up and down with no distortions. For instance, I can move it up, let's say minus 0.10. Enter. If I press Tab, Blender will make the necessary adjustments for me with no need to cut my model. The same thing applies, for instance, in case you want to move or create a new detail here. Let's imagine, for instance, that you need to create an opening here. You can select this face, press Alt E, Extrude Manifold, and Blender will give you the option. Let me extrude this minus 0.15, and Blender will create this type of detail for me. Again, if you try to do this with the regular extrude, just typing extrude, it won't work. It will work, but Blender will not cut the remaining faces for you. So you need to use the Extrude Manifold. Press Alt E again, Extrude Manifold, minus 0.15, enter. So the Extrude Manifold here in Blender is the closest that you have with SketchUp's push-pull, and it's a great resource to work with architectural modeling because it will give you a way to apply an extrude with no need to make later adjustments or cutting or removing faces from your models. Let's begin lesson 6, which will be the last lesson from our introduction to Blender for Architects. And I want to begin this last lesson by covering how to bring external data to Blender. And one of the most popular file formats, the one that I get asked the most, is SKP, or the SketchUp file format. How can you bring SketchUp files to Blender? Due to many reasons. First, of course, people have a large backlog of projects, furniture models that they are currently using in SketchUp and they would like to bring to Blender. And second is the 3D warehouse. SketchUp is quite popular not only because it has a really user-friendly interface and it's easy to model there, but you have the 3D warehouse with a massive library of furniture models, scenes, and assets that you can easily bring into a scene. However, you have to use them in SketchUp. Is there a solution? Is there a way to bring that here to Blender? Yes, we have two ways to bring this type of file to Blender. First one, if you still have access to SketchUp Pro, you can export your models there in SketchUp using the OBJ format. This format here, OBJ. Or if you can export as an FBX, it will also work. Blender can natively import either format. For instance, let me show you here. If you go to the file, import, you will see here that we have OBJ and you also have FBX. FBX and OBJ, they are universal formats that you can use to bring data, for instance, from SketchUp, from 3ds Max, from AutoCAD, from Rhinoceros. You can use them to move 3D data around. But what if you don't have access to SketchUp, or if you just want to visit the 3D warehouse, find the furniture model and insert that here into your Blender project? What is the procedure? In that case, you will have to use either the SketchUp file format, if that's the only option, or you will be using the USD file format if that asset is available from the 3D warehouse. Let me show you here what is the procedure. Let's imagine, for instance, that you have a node project. Let me explain first the SKP, the SketchUp file format. Let's imagine that you have an old project that you developed in SketchUp, and you wanna try to render that in Blender. So you don't have access to SketchUp anymore, and you will be only saving that in the SketchUp file format. In that case, you will need to use an add-on, a free add-on. It's this add-on right here. Remember when I mentioned back in the first lessons that you have add-ons in Blender, and until this point, we only used add-ons from the Blender extensions repository, and the process to install them was using the edit preferences and the get extensions. Just type the add-on here, the name, and you can click install, and it will be installed online from the Blender Foundation. This is the first add-on that we'll be using here that is not part of the Blender extensions repository. Let me bring the page here that we will have to visit. It's this one right here. The SketchUp importer from the Red Halo Studio. This is not an architectural studio. This Red Halo Studio, it's a gaming studio, but they keep modeling their scenes, their assets in SketchUp, and they want to bring them to Blender to add textures, animation. So they have this really useful free add-on, and it's on GitHub. It's free. And to download this add-on, you'll be using this link right here. I will leave this address in the comments, in the video description, in case you want to visit that this address directly to download this SketchUp importer. It's a zip file, and once you download this zip file, you will have to use here the edit preferences, either get extensions or add-ons. Click on this arrow here, and you will see this option, install from disk. Just locate your zip file and install it into Blender. Keep in mind that this add-on, sometimes it stops working. Why? Because it depends on the current state of the Blender API, the Python API. So for instance, we are right now in Blender 5.1. When we go to Blender 5.2, it might stop working. So you might need to wait to update Blender to version 5.2 if this is really important to you. Or you can keep using Blender 5.1 just to import your SketchUp files, save with the Blender native file format, and open that into Blender 5.2. Remember when I said that it's quite useful to have access to old versions of Blender? This is one of the reasons. You always have access to working add-ons that are useful, in this case, to bring SketchUp files. I already have this add-on installed. Let me scroll it down here. You will see that I have here the SketchUp importer. I will just enable the add-on. And since I have it enabled, if I go to the file, import, you will see that I now have an option here to import SketchUp files. So let's try to get one asset from the 3D warehouse. I want to bring like a furniture model. So let me bring here the 3D warehouse. Let me bring it here. I already have a selection of furniture models that I can include in our design. So let's try this lounge chair here. If you open it, you will see that here in the download section, you can get this as an SketchUp file, or as an USDZ file, or as a collada file. Blender do not support collada files anymore. The support for this file format was removed back in Blender 5. So if you want to import collada files, you have to use Blender 4.5, which is the last version supporting this file format. Now let's try with SketchUp, a SketchUp file. Let me click here to download. And I just downloaded this SketchUp file, and I will go back to Blender and I will try to import that. So let me move this out, and I will go to the file, import SketchUp. And as you see here, I have the SketchUp file. I'm already at the folder that I used to download the asset. I will hit import and wait. Depending on the file size, it might take some time. This is just a furniture piece, so it will be quite fast. You will see here that you will get new objects, new collections from the SKP imported data. And this is the object. Now let's try to locate our chair. It's right there. It's inside our scene here. Let me try to select everything from let me try to move it. I will have to select these objects here in wireframe mode. Press and hold the shift key to remove our wall and floor slab. Let me try a more drastic approach. I will select the walls and the floor slab. Let's go to the select, invert, so we can grab our objects here. I guess we have everything. Let me move it out. G, X. And with all of these objects, you will see that we have an empty. Let me see if we need this empty. No, let me press X, delete. And to make it easy to select these objects here, I will make a box selection, press the M key, and I will create a new collection for this chair. Let me call this collection chair. And you will see that we have the objects forming this chair now as a separate collection here. And the easiest way to select this chair, if you don't want to invert your selection anymore, is to grab just one object from the collection, press Shift G and select Group It. You select the collection and Blender will grab everything. Now you can easily move this to the interior here, GY, GX. Let me rotate this G, Y, GX. Let me set this to front view. And it's just touching our slab here. And the scale seems to be correct, which is one of the hardest things to get right here, because I don't really have any idea how this model was created. So we just brought this furniture model here from the 3D warehouse. Another option is to use the USDZ file format. So let me bring back here our model, and I will choose here download USDZ. And I will try to import with this file format. This is one option if you have access to the 3D warehouse and the asset that you want to use offers this USDZ. Blender can work with USDZ as well. The SketchUp file format, it's useful, for instance, for models that you have already created, for assets that are not in the 3D warehouse and do not offer support for USDZ. To import USDZ, you have to go to the file, import, and you will choose this option here. universal scene description, USD, and the asterisk here you can replace with Z. This file format has many different extensions. One of them is the Z, which is just a zip file with everything that you need for this particular asset. So let me choose this option. And let me zoom out. I already have the USDZ file here. So let me select it, import USD, and you will see the same model appearing here. Let me move it to the side, GY or GX. And you will see that we will have the model. They look really similar. I can select everything as I did with the SketchUp file. Press the M key, new collection, chair 2, and we have 2 collections with the same 3D asset. Now you just learned how to bring 3D assets from the 3D warehouse. First, using a free add-on for Blender, the first external free add-on that we used. This one, it's quite useful, it's really popular. Anyone trying to migrate from SketchUp to Blender will use this a lot to bring their files here to Blender and start rendering them with cycles, adding materials, and doing things here in Blender that you can't really do in SketchUp. And second, if you are developing a project in Blender, you can use assets from the 3D warehouse like this one here with furniture assets, with furniture models to give a sense of scale and create an interior visualization of your design. And for this section, we'll be adding materials and textures to this project. We already have walls, we have the floor here, we even added some assets. Let me remove this here, and we can begin by importing a material pack that we'll be adding to the floor slab. And the best place, one of the best places to get these types of packs is Ambient CG, which is this website here. I will leave a link in the description in case you want to go straight there with no need to type Ambient CG, but it's quite easy. Now, as you can see here, we have more than 2,800 assets. And if you just want to locate something quick, you can type here something like floor. Let's search this. By the way, with Ambient CG, you have access to not only materials, but you also can get HDR maps, which are great for lighting. So let's get this wood floor here. And one thing that I want to highlight about Ambient CG, which is great about this library, is that you can get USDZ compatible materials. What does that mean? It means you can download the zip files here. You can see that we get zip files. And once you get the zip file, you can rename the zip files to USDZ. And once you rename to USDZ, you can easily apply those materials to Blender with no need to build the entire material set in the shader editor. So let me show you step by step what you have to do. I will download this version here, this 2K JPEG. And as you can see here, this is a really small map, 16 megabytes. If you are trying to, or if you plan to go into production, or if you want to create a high resolution, a high quality render image from this project, I advise you to go with either a 4K or maybe 8K. Notice that it will add a lot of data to your project file. So keep that in mind if you plan to render this with a GPU. Now I will click here to download the 2K JPEG, and it will offer me to get a zip file. No problem. Go there and save your file. Let me open that folder. And as you can see, I already have here the zip file and a USDZ. So how do I get a USDZ? It's easy. Just press F2 and rename this asset here to USDZ. And that's easy. Let me set this to something like B. Windows will give me a warning. I will say yes, and there we have it. This is how you convert a zip file to USDZ. Now the question is, how can we bring that to Blender? The process is quite easy. Let's go back to Blender, and to get this here in Blender, go to the file, import, and choose Universal Scene Description. If I choose this option and open that folder, we'll see that it's the same file, just another version. You will see that we have the USDZ version here. How can I bring this to Blender? Just select the file and choose here import USD. But there is something that you need to do if you want to get the materials here in Blender. If you scroll down here under the options, you will see that we have a section called materials. And in this section, you will see that one option is disabled by default, which is import all materials. You need to mark that because if you don't do this, Blender will not import the materials from this file. Remember, this is not a 3D model. It won't import anything unless you select here the import all materials. So we are getting the materials only. If I hit here the import USD, apparently no error appeared, nothing, no warning, so something happens. Did we get the material? Let's check. If you select anything here like the floor object and open the material editor, if you click here, you will expand the material list. And one of the objects you can see here, we have the floor plan. And we have the fake user. This F letter here means we have the fake user enabled. So before we apply that to the floor, let's do some cleanup here first. I will select the top faces here from my floor and I will create just the top faces. The bottom I'm not selecting. Press the P key and choose selection. Let's rename everything now. I will select this object here, press F2 and call it walls. This object here, F2, will be floor. And I will select this bottom object here, F2. This will be the floor slab. And this top face, let's apply. First, let's apply a plain white material to the walls. Select here new, and you'll see that we have a new material here. Just select white, and that's it. You have now a white material applied to the walls. If you want to check if your material is correct, you can use here the material preview. Select this top face, and we will select here from our material list the wood floor. Apparently it worked, but we need to do some cleaning here to display our wood floor. First, you can easily rename your material name by just selecting here these additional letters. Let me erase everything, press enter. And now what do we have to do to fix the display of this material? Let's open the shader editor. I will create a new division here. Let's go to the shader editor. And you will see that importing that material will create the nodes here that we need to display this material. But there is a problem. You will see that this node here called UV map is displaying an error, just erase, press this X button here and click here again and choose UV map from the list. This will fix the problem, but we are still noting the material. It's not showing up there yet. And to fix this, we need to add a few additional nodes. So to make it easier for you to see what I'm about to do, I will expand the shader editor. And to expand an editor, you can press Ctrl space. And when you hit Ctrl space, you will expand one individual editor. You can press Ctrl space again to minimize that. Remember, you want to press this key when you have your cursor above the editor as the active editor. So let's go back here. I will erase this map and I will press Shift A and I will add here one new node called texture coordinate. Control Shift A. Let's go to utilities, vector, mapping. And I will connect here, just click and drag from the generated to vector. And I will connect this vector here to the vector. Let me connect it here, this one here, and this one here. And if I press Ctrl space again, you will see that we can now see our texture. And you can control your scale by changing the tiling size here. Let's change this to 0.5, 0.5. It will increase the size, but we actually need it to be smaller. So let's go with 3. And if you want, you can add a rotation. Let's add 45 degrees as a rotation here on the mapping. And now we have our material. So this is an easy way to add materials in Blender. And by the way, in case you want to reapply a material, just add a new object and you can select the same material here from the list. All of these materials here that are showing up in Blender, they came from the SketchUp model that we used. So we can select, for instance, the wood floor here again, and it will apply the wood floor to this cube or any other plane. It's showing up as this stretch here because it's using a flat mapping right here. If you change to box, it will change the mapping of this object. Now, how can we render this project? We already have two materials, one for the floor and one for the walls. I want to start rendering this. I'll be adding an HDR map as an environment texture. This is the easiest way or the fastest way to get a render done or lighting done with cycles. So let's come here back to ambient CG and I will go back to the first screen and we will look here under HDR maps. Click there and you can look into many different options available here. You will see, for instance, that we can pick any one of these maps. Let's try to get one with a clear daylight like this one here. And as you will see, it will give us a nice background with a sky. And the best part is that we can replicate this type of light inside Blender. I will download a 2K map. Let me click here. And let's save this file. I will go to the folder and I will extract the contents. Let me right click, choose extract all. And here we have it. We have this file here on EXR. This is the map that we'll be using inside Blender. So let's go back to Blender, and where we'll be adding this, if you take a look here under the World tab, you have this panel here, this option called Color. Click on the yellow dot, the yellow circle, and choose Environment Texture. Here you will see an option where you can create a new texture. Select one that you have inside your project. We don't have any. Or you can open a new map. Let's open a new map. And I'm at that same folder that I saved my file. This is the location, and I will import here, or I will open the EXR map. Open this image, and you will see that it's now loaded into Blender. In case you don't want to lose this file, for instance, if you want to save this Blender project here and send to someone else, you can enable this fake user here first to make sure you don't lose this file. And you can also go to the file, external data, and choose this option here called pack resources. This will attach any external file to your Blender project, so you can move it around with no need to send multiple files. Let me pack here. You will see that Blender will display now a small box next to the file name, meaning it's packed into our project. Now, how can we take a look into the render of the scene using this map? If you enable now, first let me change here to cycles. I'm already in cycles. If I go back here to our render properties, let's enable here the preview. I will enable here the viewport shading as rendered. And you will see that Blender will start rendering our project. Of course, depending on your computer, on your hardware, it might be easier or faster to render this, but you can see a really nice preview on how this light here will work for this project. And of course, we need a lot more samples here. Let's, in the next video, I will explain step by step what you have to do to improve this render here and display a much better output. Now let's try to improve this render here. As you can see, it's quite noisy, and we want to gain control over shadow direction. Let's do these two things. Again, I'm using cycles for this, not EEVE. I will go back to my solid view. Let me create a few divisions here because this preview here is taking way too much time. I'm using a really high resolution here, so using my entire screen for the preview will take a lot of resources. So this will be easier. We'll just use a small section of our screen. Now, what is the first thing that I want to do? I want to remove my HDR image here from the background. As you can see, we have a nice background, but it doesn't match with what we have here in this scene. To remove this HDR map from the background, you have to go here under Ray Visibility. I'm in the world tab from my properties editor. Expand here the Ray Visibility and disable. Let me get out of the way here so you can see. You will see here that the ray visibility will give us control over where you want to view your background texture, and I want to disable the camera So it will not show up in the camera, but we will get that ugly black background. To fix this, you can use a transparent background. Open the Render Properties tab, scroll down here and look for Film. And under the Film settings, you can enable the transparent option. This will give you a way to get a transparent background. Now, how can we get control over the shadow direction? But before that, let me, since we are in the render settings here, you can enable the denoiser. This is for the viewport. You will see that we have two denoisers. We have one here and we have another one right here. The top one is for the viewport, the bottom is for the final render. So I will enable my denoiser for the viewport, and you will see that Blender will remove some of the noise from the render, and it looks like it's kind of washed. It's because the denoiser process will add a small amount of blur between each one of the pixels. So this is one of the ways that Blender uses to remove noise. Now, if you want to have control over shadow direction, we need to go back to the shader editor, because it's there that we will be adding additional nodes to control shadow direction. We'll do something that looks like a lot what we did with the floor texture. So I will open this. I will be using this division here. Let's change to shader editor. And at the top of the shader editor, you see that we have a selector where you can choose between object and world. This is what we want to edit. When you change to world, Blender will display the options here or any nodes that you have in your world settings. And for us, you will find the EXR texture. Press Shift A and add the exact same nodes that we added to the floor material. Press Shift A, go to Input, Texture Coordinate, Shift A, Utilities, and Vector, choose Mapping. Add it here. And you can connect here the generated to the vector and vector to vector. And now you can rotate the Z axis here from your texture. Let me show you the results. Let's try to rotate this 45 degrees. You will see that we are rotating our texture. Let me rotate this 60 degrees. You can even add an outside object here. Let me press Shift C, Shift A, Mesh Plane, and GX, GY, GZ minus 0.1. And if I try to render this preview again, you will see that we have cycles rendering. The scene. So this is the workflow that you will use in any project that you want to render. This is a quick setup. Of course, we could go into much more settings and adjustments, but you will be able to get really a quick render from your scenes using this workflow. Let's start our last and final section of this introduction to Blender for architects. And I want to create in this section an isometric camera where we will be rendering this project here. Now, why do we need to create a camera to render the project in Blender? Because Blender will only render what the active camera is looking. So we need a camera. If you don't have one, you can easily create with Shift A and choosing here camera. We just created a camera. Move the camera up, GZ, so it will stay here. Let me disable my snapping. And I will try to place my camera somewhere around here. So to align your camera, there is a shortcut, of course, that will help you a lot, which is Control Alt and the numpad 0, the 0 from your numeric keyboard. So Control Alt 0. This will place the camera right here, but this won't give us an isometric camera. To create an isometric camera, we have to change a few settings from the camera itself. So make sure you have the camera selected and open here the Object tab. And in the Object tab, you will see that we have a rotation, the rotation controls for this camera. And to make things easier, let's set this view here to the top, and as you will notice, I'm in this corner, so I will try to point the camera into this direction. Here, let me zoom out so you can take a better look. I will try to place my camera or viewing, pointing the camera in this direction here from this corner, looking at this location. Now, what is the secret? What are the angles that you have to use to manage this camera with an isometric viewport? Let me change here the bottom as the camera view. To set your view to the camera, press the 0 from your numeric keyboard. Now I will change the angle here. First one is the X rotation. It will be 45 degrees. Oh, sorry, this will be 60 degrees. And my Z here will be minus 45 because I want to create something like this. Let me show my camera view here. Let's move the camera. You can select the camera by clicking here at the border and using the G key. And if you want to zoom in or out from the camera, you have to move the camera in the Z local axis. To do this, you have to press G and Z twice. When you do this, you can scroll up, in and out. You can see that the camera is moving closer or away from the object. Now, this is not a true isometric camera because we have to make one additional change here to the camera, which is to set this camera to an orthographic projection because it's right now using a perspective projection. Let me open the camera properties. Make sure you have the camera selected. Open here the data, the object data properties, and at the top, you will see that we have the type option where you can change from perspective to orthographic. And when you do this, you will get this view here with an orthographic projection. Change the orthographic scale here to change the camera zoom or magnification, and you can change here, for instance, this the framing of the camera. Now we have an isometric projection. Now there is a small distortion in the Blender camera, so you can't really use 60 here. You have to use 54.736. This is the correct angle to get an isometric projection. Let me zoom out here so we can cover all of the space, and we now have an isometric projection. If you want to know why we have this, we have to use this 54.736. I have an entire article in Blender 3D Architect explaining this. It's quite it's kind of old. It's from 2017, but it explains the distortion that you get when you try to use 60 degrees for an isometric camera projection. Now we have the camera in place. So how can we start rendering? The render process now, it's quite easy. Go to the render properties. Make sure you are using the correct number of samples here. 4096 is a lot. Let's go with something much smaller, like 256. Make sure you have the denoise enabled. Choose your resolution output. I'm using full HD. You can see here that you will set up the output resolution in the output tab and the render settings with render controls. I will scale down our output by 50%, so I'll get just half of this output to make it faster. And when you are ready, just press F12. And Blender will start rendering. Wait a few seconds, you will see a preview here. You will see that Blender will display the remaining time. And here it will display the total time used to render this project. You see that we are just rendering a small image, just to make sure everything's correct. I will change the plane outside of this project here, just the color, to make sure we have a nice contrast. Let me add something like this color, and we can increase here the scale to 75%. Let's try this one more time. F12, it's the hotkey that you use to start rendering in Blender. I will pause the video and get back when the render is done. And we just finished our render. How to save this output? It's easy. Go to the image, save as, and you can save this as a PNG file, a JPEG, in case you want to send this to someone to evaluate your design. This is one of the easiest ways here to save your output. And we are done. This is the final result here. You can keep adding more furniture pieces. You can keep adding more objects to this design and improve the output. And as you can see, we have the camera here. It's ready, so you don't really have to do anything else. Just press the 0 from your numeric keyboard and it will go back to the view. And this is it. You reached the last section from the last lesson of this introduction to Blender for architects. I really hope you liked the content and you can consider Blender as part of your modeling workflow, 3D modeling workflow for your next project, interior visualization, or any project that you want to use real world dimensions in Blender. Remember, Blender is free and open source. And if you feel that you need more exercises, more practice, or more examples, don't forget, I will leave links in the description with additional workshops. I have one, for instance, called Blender Precise 3D Modeling, where I teach you how to use Blender as if it was a CAD tool. I will go much further, much beyond what I explained to you here in this introduction. I will explore a lot more free add-ons and tools, resources to close the gap, for instance, between Blender and something like SketchUp or even AutoCAD. I have another workshop called Blender for Architects, where I will teach you how to do 2D drafting. You will create PDFs with CAD style output. I'll teach you how to work with dimension lines and a lot other resources or tools that are quite common to find in softwares like SketchUp and Layout. So if you want to learn more, don't forget, check the links in the description. And besides workshops, I will also leave links in the description for some of my books. Remember, I wrote more than 18 titles about Blender, and if you want to get any of them, you will find links below. And in case you are not aware, if you are a pro member of the channel, you will receive free access codes for either workshops or books 2 times each month. So if you join as a pro member of Blender 3D Architect, you will receive free access to workshops or books. So consider becoming a channel member. It will support my work here in Blender 3D Architect. So this is it. We reached the end of this introduction to Blender for Architects. If you liked the content, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and consider sharing this video with a fellow architect or anyone that thinks that Blender is not fit to do architectural 3D modeling. See you next time. Bye.